We'll call our August 18th, 2014 meeting to order. If I could get a roll call, please.
Mayor Householder?
Here.
Commissioner Blanchard?
Here.
Commissioner Crawford?
Here.
Commissioner Hardy?
Here.
Commissioner Shirley?
Here.
At this time, all who are able to do so, if you would please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance in a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We have no awards and proclamations today, so I'll open this up to the Citizens Forum. This is an opportunity for anyone to come up and speak regarding an item that is not on today's agenda. You'll have a time at those items to speak. And if you would please, if you want to come before us, if you'd let us know your name and address, I'd appreciate it. Anyone? Okay. Then we'll move on to public hearings and items scheduled for a certain time.
Item 5.1, continuation of public hearing on an appeal of the Heritage Commission's approval of Certificate of Appropriateness, application number CA13-2, requesting approval of a Certificate of Appropriateness to allow the demolition of the vacant St. John's Hospital building located at 139 North Penn Avenue.
Mr. Andrew, you're going to lead us on this? Is that correct? See? It's fine. Maybe he's having a late lunch. Any of us could do it. We could read off the blues sheet in the same monotone that Dean does. We could probably. I know he does that to not give any inflection or balance. So. It's not because he's a dry speaker. Getting his notes together, maybe. I suppose we could go on to the consent agenda, maybe. That's usually, oh, here he comes, okay. I know you're not, we're usually starting late, but today we actually got a little early, so. And I didn't say anything about you speaking like a monotone or anything like that.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, I can't emulate your voice.
Yeah. Thank God. Yeah.
Good for you, Dean.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
Well, we are here as a continuation of a public hearing, and just by way of background, this started with a demolition permit request that was filed by Salina Regional Health Center. And the area there that's outlined in blue is a heritage conservation property which is protected from demolition without essentially a due process hearing to see if there's any alternatives to demolition. That hearing was held in December of 2013 by the Heritage Commission. They concluded at the end of their hearing that there was no feasible alternative to demolition and authorized that to occur. There was an appeal filed by Mr. Jim Ravenkamp to ask the City Commission to review that decision. That appeal was timely filed, and the result of that, there was a hearing held by you in January. There were some discussions in January about a possible party comprise coming forward with some options for redevelopment. You continued the January public hearing to April to allow those to come forward. In April, you reviewed basically a development or redevelopment proposal from Comprise, but it was it had a due diligence period in there where they would be allowed access to the property to analyze it, to look at their own economic and structural analysis, to seek financing tools, even to come before you for incentives. So at the close of that meeting in April, you made a motion to continue the review till today's date. And so we stand before you today as a city staff without having much additional information. The only contact I've had was somebody working for Comprise that just wanted to confirm the zoning of the property, which is R3, and what the permitted uses were under that, which includes most forms of residential housing. So the purpose of today's hearing is a status update, and our update is there's not much change in status other than a 90-day due diligence period has expired as of August 1st, and we are not able to confirm for you that Comprise is elected to extend that. So you may actually learn more information from the original applicant, Mr. Hennenkamp, on behalf of the Health Center than you would from staff, because staff has had very little interaction since April with Comprise.
Okay. Any questions for staff?
And I guess I will let Mr. Luckman assist you as to what your options are, but basically our report has given you the same options as you had in April, which are to continue this process if there's a reason to do so, to review the findings of the Heritage Commission, and you can support those or you can overrule those. The difference between options 1 and options 2 and 3, essentially options 2 and 3 are final decisions, and option 1 basically keeps the process alive if there's a reason to do so. So we have Mr. Luckman, we have other members of staff here for questions, but that is a synopsis of where we are, and certainly we have Mr. Hennenkamp here, who is the original applicant for demolition.
I'm sorry.
ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Well, my only question was, at least from my end of it, I'm more interested in the original part of the building and not all of the additions. And so I didn't know if there was room for another option where the older part of the building was separated out from the rest of the campus for discussion in terms of demolition or other uses.
John, do you have the site plan that shows how we have broken that out? Basically, what you see here is this is the very core, this is the very original. Certainly an argument can be made from a historic preservation standpoint that these newer additions, some as recent as the late 80s, are not as historically significant as this portion here, and that is certainly an option. It would certainly be an option from, the demolition permit is for the entire structure, including all additions. John, do you want to, this, just to clarify, the contract that Comprise has is to purchase this entire block, which includes this Medias Center building. The Medias Center building is not a architecturally or historically significant building. It is not part of the protected area, but it is certainly from a historic protection, historic preservation standpoint, it is certainly an option to say that sufficient findings have been made to allow this to occur, but that the core original, which I think most people would agree was the primary basis for the historic designation, you could certainly make a distinction between this part and the remainder.
Does the portion labeled patient tower, is that also, do we have a date on that?
It is 1951.
1951. Does it also have the terracotta tile?
It does. It attempted to emulate the architectural style and all of the original building.
Right.
And so it comes the closest, that wing comes the closest to being part of a true addition to the original. They attempted to match roof lines and materials and those things. Later additions were done with similar brick, but not to the same level of detail.
And generally speaking, is the condition of those two portions of the building similar and in better shape than the ones with the flat roofs and where we saw the ceiling tile dangling from?
I think that we have not, as a city staff, been in and done a walkthrough of the building, but certainly from the evidence presented and the photos presented to the Heritage Commission, it was the flat-roofed portions, some of the more recent portions that had more of the water seepage and mold and damage more so than the pitched roof, which actually tends to shed water better than the flat roof portions.
And then to kind of get to Commissioner Hardy's question there too, could we consider those portions of the building that do have the tile roof and the older looking sections, are they structurally sound? I mean, we're not worried about these things collapsing, and there's not a health.
Well, that has been one of the more challenging aspects, and we kind of noted that in our report. The Salina Regional Health Center has not retained the services of a licensed architect or professional engineer to provide any kind of structural or feasibility analysis or structural integrity analysis of the building. And on the flip side, neither has Comprise done a structural analysis or had an architect or engineer submit a report that goes the other way. So one of the challenges in this case, more so than in previous historic preservation cases that we've had, is at this point we've got photographs and we've got kind of anecdotal reports, but we don't have something from a structural engineer or an architect who says, I've gone in and inspected the building and I find that from a structural standpoint there's no reason this portion can't be saved and rehabilitated, nor do we have it on the other side. And as you look at your motion and staff's reports, that's part of the reason that this has been extended and continued, is the hope that the initial indications from the Planning Commission or the Heritage Commission in this case was that there could have been done more from a professional review from an architect or engineer as to the structural integrity of the building than what we have. Certainly we had that in the case of Glenn Martin Stadium from Kansas Wesleyan. We had that in the case of Hawthorne School. We don't have that here, and neither the hospital has stepped forward with offering that in support of demolition, nor has Comprise stepped forward and offered that in terms of demonstrating that it is feasible to rehabilitate the building.
Thank you.
Any other questions for staff?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gunner. Would the applicant care to speak on this?
My name is Jack Hennenkamp. I'm representing Salina Regional Health Center. Thank you for your time today. And listening to the questions today, and this stretched for quite a period of time, we have not engaged an engineer or a structural engineer to evaluate the facility. That's true, because we don't have any doubt that that facility could be there for quite some period of time. We're simply not interested in retaining it. Somebody that wants to retain the facility is welcome to purchase the facility, is welcome to do that. We are not interested in retaining the facility based on having looked at this from 2002 onward in alternative use. Early on, we were not able to establish some uses of persons that were interested because they were for-profits entering into a not-for-profit, and that just was something we couldn't do based on our tax-exempt status. Subsequent to that, as we became more aggressive, we've had those that simply said, you know, we've looked at it and we cannot redo that building. I have been somewhat confused from the very outset on what portion of the building was in the heritage, or not in the heritage, but considered of historic significance versus other, because my understanding originally was the 1914 building, and that was the only issue. We did engage, I don't know, I wouldn't say engage, we did talk with a local architect about do they think the building could still stay standing. We engaged an engineer, which we've communicated previously, and the answer was, yeah, you probably could take everything down except the 1914 building and have it stand. It would be extraordinarily expensive, very difficult to do, and you would lose many of the features of the original 1914 building in doing that based on how subsequent construction take place. So we're not disputing the fact that someone with enough dollars, enough time, enough energy, and willing to either have a very deep pocket or put themselves in a financially difficult position couldn't do that. We've never denied that and see no reason for us to engage someone to do that when we already are convinced that somebody with enough money could make that happen. We do not have much information, and I have communicated the information I do have to Mike Scragg as recently as last week and actually today from Comprise. We are still holding out high hopes, as I've communicated previously. The estimated cost for us to demo the facility is get rid of the asbestos and any other hazardous material and bring it down, put the site into good condition, is about $1.5 million. So we have no interest in doing that if there is a viable use for the building. Comprise is the only group that has stepped forward. As noted previously, Pioneer Group and Landmark Group were two redevelopers that decided they could not make that work. I would add at this time, in the latter part of June of this year, I received a call from Ken Kennedy of, at that time, USD 305. He noted he'd received a call from Selden Company, which develops abandoned or unused buildings for reuse, typically for affordable housing. He noted the school district did not have, Ken noted to them that the school district did not have any buildings, but maybe we would have an interest from Penn. So Ken called me and asked me, he said, would you mind if I gave them your name? And I said, no, that's fine, I'd be glad to talk with them. The building is sold, however, to Comprise on a contingency basis. Mid-July, I received a call from Mike Fallison, who was the vice president with Selden Company located in Omaha, Nebraska. Mr. Fallison stated Selden is the largest developer of historic properties for affordable, that is, low-income housing in the Midwest. He did express an interest to me in their acquisition of the Penn campus from the information he'd received from Ken Kennedy and in the short conversation I had with him. I did advise it was sold, but with contingencies, and gave him the expected time frame remaining to resolve to whether it would become a completed sale or not. As I noted, he stated he was interested. I described the property, I think, favorably. While we were discussing, though, he asked for the address and some online photographs, which I provided to him. At the conclusion of that review, while we were on the phone, he advised that they would not be interested after all. He said they could not redevelop that building. He advised it was very sprawling, it would be difficult to demo portions while retaining enough to make it into viable apartments of the type that would be necessary for a favorable economic return. I went a couple more times of any way they might have an interest, and we are still working with Comprise, of course, but in the event that failed, he was very firm finally in the end saying no. He said we cannot make that project work, and I've done a lot of them. That project will not work for any of that type of function. So with that, there's been 3 of 4 that have said we cannot make that work, and that is our business to make older buildings work. And the ones that can be made to work, we do that. But they will only do it on a financially viable basis. So I did want to introduce that at that time. You're welcome to contact Mike Fallison yourselves if you would wish. As I said, we are in hopes that Comprise will come through, but we have had some communication from them. I know they had architects reviewing the site, interior, to see what they think could happen. But as of the information I received last Thursday, after pressing pretty hard for information, because I've also noted to them that if they are successful in the others, the city of Salina will need to participate, according to them, in TIF financing or work associated with TIF. And I said, your time is running short based on the contract, and that is not a process that goes necessarily quickly within the city of Salina for many good reasons, a process you want to follow through. The last note I have a meeting tomorrow afternoon regarding the deal. I will get back by the end of business tomorrow for certain. That was Friday. I have not heard back as of today. So we are not asking, so I guess what I'm up here today to ask for is that the City Commission grant the demolition of the property as approved by the Heritage Commission last December, contingent on whether the comprise arrangement goes through. If the comprise arrangement goes through, we're happy. We're pleased with that. They can make it work, and we want to close out that sale, and hopefully the City of Salina will participate in the way that comprise has indicated the City of Salina would need to do to make that work. However, should that fail, we don't want to continue to come here and appear and ask for approval that was granted by the Heritage Commission at the time. So that's kind of what we're asking for today, and it's the same as we've asked for the 2 prior meetings. I'd be glad to respond to any questions you have.
Great. Any questions for the applicant? Just a thought, it's going to cost you $1.5 million to tear down if you offered comprise $1 million to take it. Just still
We
saving
have
you money.
not, and, I mean, one of the things is, I think the building can be sold to someone. I
Yeah.
just don't know that it would benefit any of us for that to take place, and we've made it pretty clear we cannot find a use for it. I will say, Selden said, but if you guys go ahead and remove the building, be sure and call us. We'd be glad to develop the site for you.
Yeah.
That has been a consistent message with everyone that we have talked with, and of course, if we spend that kind of money on it, we've developed the Disaster Recovery Center. The foundation, with coordination of us and donation of property, has developed the Donna Veneer Children's Center, and we would anticipate developing something similar along that line. Subsequent to this, we have donated 3 properties we're looking at demolition to the Ashby House for reuse of those properties, 110, 112, 118 Oakdale, and 708 Johnstown. But I don't think we would give comprise $1.5 million.
I was going to save
They're
you
already getting a pretty good deal
but
on
yeah.
the building if it works for them.
Yeah, we always got to think outside the box.
And I think you might end up with $1.5 million we'd give away, and you still have a building standing there.
That's
in
what,
the end.
yeah, there'd be some concern of that too. You're exactly right. So, well, if there's no questions for the applicant, any at all? Okay, thank you, Mr. Hennekamp. Is there anyone here from the public that wants to speak on this issue? And then one thing we're going to do, probably a little differently, we'll start doing it in the interest of keeping the public comments more informative and less debative, is if you can get all your thoughts gathered that first time through, come up and speak one time, and then don't speak from the peanut gallery or whatever you want to call it out there once you're done with your the public input on that. So, anyone here to speak on this issue?
Jim Ravenkamp, 652 South Santa Fe. Obviously, I'm here the same reason as they are, except for I'm on the other side. I want the building, the 51 and the 14 building, to stay because of the historical value of it more than anything. But, you know, I guess, you know, it goes back to, you know, like I have questions in my mind is why do we have a conservation district ordinance, you know, listing these buildings as they have listed the St. John's Penn campus building, the 1914. And, you know, why does the city of Salina even have that ordinance if we can't live by it? And because by tearing those down, it's just, you know, taking away a building that's on that list. And you know, another question that I have in my own mind is you know, we have the property maintenance ordinance, you know, which that's what's wrong with that building today, and that's probably the reason why a lot of people aren't interested in it, is because they see those pictures and they say, no, it's beyond repair or whatever, and that's the older parts that weren't being kept up on the roof. And you know, that property maintenance ordinance, you know, why do we even have it? if we can't make the parties of ownership be responsible for keeping up those buildings so they don't deteriorate. And you know, in reality, I don't think that the 14 and the 51 building is in that bad a shape. And to see those two buildings come down, in my mind, would just be just historically, you know, why don't we just tear down all of our historic buildings? I mean, that's just, I mean, it's 100 years old, and I just have a real problem with taking down older buildings. We've taken enough of them down in Salina, and I wish we had them back, but we can't. And after this one would go down, if it went down, I would want that one back too, but you can't have it back after you take them down. And you know, I mean, if you're voting on anything, I still would like to see the number 3 option, but of no demolition of the buildings. Except, although I would like to see the 1, if not the 3. So, you know, there again, it's I know it costs the hospital money to keep it up, but yet that's the owner. That's the responsibility of an owner, just as it is for me to live in a historical district, owning a house in the historical district. That's my responsibility to keep that house up, so it's not demoed or you know, so it goes in deterioration and has to be torn down, and that's exactly what's happened here. And I've said once, and I've said it twice and 3 times, and I'll say it again. I think it was. I think the owners. I'm not going to go as far as to say purposely, but it was. They just didn't keep the buildings up for a reason, because they wanted to keep the cost down and have them demoed. So, I still think there's a need for that building. You know, we have the new grocery store going in, you know, on Iron Street. That I think, you know, low income or elderly housing would support that, or would help support that. And you know, we just. But the main thing is we just need to keep our heritage, and I question why we even have a Heritage Commission. You know, those are the whys that I have. You know, why do we have a Heritage Commission? Why do we have you know, the heritage preservation, and then why do we have property maintenance, or the property ordinance that you know, if we aren't going to abide by them, just abolish them. And I think it was the Heritage Commission's part in giving them the go-ahead to demolish the building. So that's all I have, unless you have any questions.
Any questions?
And
Okay.
I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Ravenkamp. Anyone else from the public care to speak on this matter? Okay, seeing none, I'll close the public section of this out and bring it back to the commission for discussion.
Part of our initial discussion of this subject that is indelibly burned in my brain is the slideshow that we saw. And in my mind, I was trying to act as a potential buyer of the property, and that the hospital was acting as a real estate agent trying to sell that property. And the slides that I saw told me everything different than what I expected to see, with all of the ceiling tiles hanging down. There wasn't one slide I saw that tried to promote that building as a building that could potentially be used for other purposes. And it was at that point I couldn't understand the position that they took, and whether or not they determined they wanted to continue pouring money into the building for its upkeep. They just decided not to, and my house is on the same list that their St. John or the Penn campus is on. And if I have issues with my house, there's no question I take care of them. And I think that the Salina Regional possibly, if they had taken a different route, if they would maintain the building in the same quality in the same quality that it was when the last patient walked out of that building, that we would not have a situation where, you know, we can't sell it any longer. I think the building would be could be used for some other purposes, and it's just too bad that it was allowed to deteriorate into the condition that it is today.
I've got a question that perhaps is, in just looking at this and looking at the 1951 and the 1914 portions of that building, and that is, Dean, do you or maybe John, what are some of the older buildings that might be older than this in town? That are, I mean, there might be a few houses that might barely be standing, but are architecturally significant type buildings?
Oh, certainly this was built in 1914, and we do have the county courthouse, which was built earlier than this, several residences in town that are of note, the Schwartz House on East Iron, as well as the Campbell House on South 9th. So there's a lot of homes that go into the 1880s and on from that. There are less so in the downtown area, mainly because of redevelopment. We're noting that the old YMCA, the old federal building, those were lost, of course. But in the downtown, there are a lot of core buildings that go also into the 1880s, and they've just been remodeled as time goes on, but they're still functional.
What year was the Steeple Theater, well, what's called the Steeple Theater now? What year was that built?
In 1931.
1931, so that's not even near the age of this thing. And then I would assume when that building was redeveloped that there were considerable challenges involved with, you know, it might have been cheaper to tear that down and build a new theater. Anybody involved with the Dean on that? I mean, was there
essentially that started with the Dickinson's theaters closing it, and then they basically donated the theater to the city of Salina, and the city mothballed the building and took care of it, kept the roof from leaking, kept it secure until such time that there was a foundation and a board created for the purpose of trying to get it rehabilitated. But certainly the fact that the Steeple Theater is on the National Register of Historic Places, they were able to utilize historic tax credits to assist with some of the financing, and obviously there was a lot of private fundraising and donations that went into that. The city made a donation towards the renovation of the building, but it was actually in the city's ownership and custody, and John Berger himself was over there a lot watching for leaks and things like that. So we tried to stay on top of it to make sure that the building was secure and not damaged by water penetration or things like that until there was kind of a ground swell of interest in getting that back into a functioning theater.
Thank you. Just a couple thoughts that I had on just the idea that we're not going to build another building like this ever is one of the things, and I think that Mr. Ravenscamp, I think, was getting at it. We're just not going to do this. We can't replace this thing. We can't even come close. When we say it's cheaper to tear it down and build new, well, it might be, but we're talking about pole barns and metal-sided buildings. We're not talking anything with the craftsmanship that's involved with a thing like this. And I think that being a community that really values art and design and such, something I feel like I keep going back to the part of the findings here that and it's listed in our packages, so for the benefit of those of you out there, it just states that the hospital building is architecturally and/or historically significant, and that was a question. And I feel like you can't look at that, drive by it, and say no to that. I think the answer is absolutely it is. And so that's where I struggle the most. And it goes back to, we have a Heritage Commission, we have a Conservation Code, and we have all that. And that is so that we are very diligent and deliberate about what we do in circumstances like this. And in this case, I think you said we started in December, so we're a lot more deliberative as usual, but I think that it calls for it. And so the other thing is I've heard that, well, everybody looked at this thing and nobody wants to do that nobody just sees any way forward with that. And I'll just remind some folks that we heard the same thing. We heard that same argument with a grocery store on East Iron, that nobody wants to build in there, nobody wants to go in that thing, and then there was a grocery store that decided that was the best location to do it. So I'm afraid we tear this down and it's gone forever. I'd like to see it stay, so I'm open to 1 or 3, but I want to see it stay.
I agree with Commissioner Blanchard. I don't know if there's a workable solution. I don't know. Is there any possibility to the hospital would demolish the outbuildings other than and keep the main building and donate it to the city? I mean, I'm trying to think outside the box. But, I would like to see it stay. And I don't know anything about architecture. I just know it's a beautiful building. And we don't build buildings like that anymore.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, I guess my thoughts were kind of the same thing and kind of trying to find a compromise in some way. I'm not an architect. I'm not an engineer. I don't know what removing those new parts would do and what we would ask or how far we could go with it and say, okay, if you tear that down, it needs to be, stabilized in a way that, I think it would get us into interesting territory to try and dictate how much somebody can tear down and what they have to leave us. And whoops, the wrecking ball accidentally slid a little too much to the north. And, so I think that, do we get into some really tough areas there?
I think so.
Yeah.
The issue that I would have with that is the application was submitted. You are an appellate body at this point. You're reviewing a decision that was based, I believe, upon an application that was made for the entirety of the building, and ultimately the applicant is in control of that, and they needn't accept the ruling on that necessarily if you say, you'll allow them to remove the newer portions of the building.
Sure.
And leave it there.
That could be a future application. I mean, just thinking down the road, it would not be part of this. That could be something they could come back if they so decided to do so.
But at the same point, there's some options there too to, if it is in this, if the commission has decided that essentially they do not want the older building torn down, and that is a significant enough reason under whatever findings you desire that says we will deny the permit as submitted, and perhaps indicate, you know, on the record that had an application for, you know, the external building's been submitted alone, that would have resolved the findings that you make, and would have changed your result, you know, just as far as a, you know, advisory ruling on that matter. It would be, I think that would be acceptable, but of course I still think we have to be guided into the fact that we're looking at those options of acceptance, denial of the application and the ruling of the Heritage Commission, and ultimately a waiting game if you guys desire to see what happens with Comprise.
Okay.
And I'll remind you too, as we have in the past, that you do have the ability to go into closed session to discuss, you know, any of these issues as far as what your findings would be, what the facts are, what everybody's feelings are about it, or whatever at this point in time too, if that would be more amenable.
Okay, thank you. Any other thoughts on that?
What, in looking at 1 and 3, and this may, if this is a trigger for a closed session, then let me know. But what essentially is the, other than the fact that one of them is continuing the meeting and the other one, does number 3 start the clock on a timetable that will eventually lead to the possibility of the demolition?
Well, I think it starts certainly one timetable, which is a final decision that if there's a party that is dissatisfied with your ruling, that they would have then court processes likely to engage in a certain amount of time to stop, you know, either the demolition or to force a different result. That, I think, is not what your question is whether or not they would be required to tear it down within a certain period of time. And I did ask that question, and we don't have, I didn't see anything in the regs about this particular question, but it's my understanding that generally there's 6 months for a demolition permit. Maybe you want to tell us?
Say that in the specific context of a zoning case or zoning related case, if the City Commission makes a final decision on a zoning request, that is the final decision on that, and the owner of that property cannot submit a new or similar or even identical application they have to wait 6 months before they can resubmit. So I think what Mr. Luckman's trying to tell you is that basically you have an application that is before you, and options 2 and 3 are a final decision on that application. And option 3 says the application is denied. That's telling the hospital that you may not proceed with demolition, and then that application is closed out, and then the ball would be in Salina Regional Health Center's court to submit alternatives or to wait 6 months and resubmit.
Dean, I think the specific question I had, and I think what I understood to be, if it was granted that they could demolish and were given a permit, and we still have, and as I understand it from what Mr. Hennenkamp said, was that they would still pursue what's going on with Comprise to the end of its contract, and that if they had the permit, it wouldn't expire. If they had a demolition
permit in hand, it would not expire for 180 days. If they didn't act on that in 180 days, the demolition permit would expire.
I appreciate that answer, but you both answered the question, and Dean, I think, probably got to what I was looking at. And so my question would be on, because the mayor had asked the question, can they bring in something different? So if it were to be, if number 3 were to be voted on and passed, is there any sort of waiver if they wanted to come in and say, well, listen, we just then like to demo the non-1914 portion, or non-1914 and 51 portion? Or do they have to wait 6 months to do that? I mean, is that 6-month waiting period something that can be
waived?
Waived.
I would have to look more carefully at the code before I'd be able to give you a response. I can't, my gut reaction is that, yeah, you could state essentially that you were denying the permit without prejudice to reapply under certain conditions. I think it would have to be, again, in accordance with your findings, meaning that you'd have to say, the findings would have to make sense as far as you're finding that the newer structures are problematic, not the old structure, and that if, you know, that's why you're deciding what you're deciding, and if that changed, you're denying it, and you would say, this is without prejudice to them resubmitting a new application.
I doubt they would disagree with
And
waiting
then-
6 months. I'm sure they'd like to
And then just
get one right
one-
back in front of us, yeah.
And then just one last question, and that is, gosh, you made me lose my train of thought there. Well, if I can think of that again, I had it there, but
Okay,
give me
so
just a
so
second.
basically the concept would be if we went with option 3, we could theoretically say, go with what we're going to overturn the decision on and on. We find that and maybe respond that we wouldn't hold prejudice and require the 6 months, but one of the main basis for our finding of this was that we did not disagree that the newer parts of the building were not significant, and is that kind of where the direction we
Well,
would
and
go?
I think that we'd have to discuss how the fact findings fit within that
Sure, sure.
specifically, but yeah, if that's the general direction you'd have to go.
Okay.
Would that be more appropriate than option number 1, allowing Comprise a little more time to come to a decision? Just because they haven't answered yet doesn't necessarily, in my mind anyway, mean that they don't intend to answer.
I think maybe just that postpones us again, doesn't it? Is that what it kind of does? It just kind of continues this to the same...
Yeah, the
And-
postponement is, again, up to your discretion about how long, but I think that's a good point, is that at this point, the conditional contract, I don't know what kind of pressure Comprise is under to work on it as much as maybe they should, because there really isn't any alternative as far as the applicant is concerned, and perhaps if they have, you know, the knowledge that the hospital will act in regards with the request of Mr. Hinnenkamp for option number 3, that they would maybe be more eager to address the timeline.
I remembered my question, and that was, if number 3 were the prevailing option, and you had mentioned that there is an appeal process through the courts, and would that appeal be towards the findings, or toward whether or not we have the ability through that ordinance to even would the challenge be on the ordinance, or would the challenge be on the findings?
Challenge would normally be on the findings. It's pretty open-ended as to what they could, if a party was, I suppose, and I'm presuming this would be the hospital said that they're appealing this, they could appeal a designation, I suppose. They would likely have a lot of trouble with that, you know, because of because they came here and asked for it. I think you could argue that they're stopped, or they're basically blocked from contesting the validity of the ordinance. I think the main argument would probably be towards your findings and any problems they have with the findings or the way the procedure went.
Okay.
Commissioners, one thing to possibly take into consideration, I think this would need to be vetted further with Mr. Luckman, but in your code, when it talks about the exceptions and so forth in the appeal, and it addresses the 1-year timeline, it says, upon making findings that the standards set out above are not sufficiently met, and this is, of course, referring to the Heritage Commission in the code, may deny the certificate of appropriateness or defer decision for relocation or demolition for up to 1 year. It's mentioned in your packet, 1 year during which the applicant must conduct a bona fide effort to preserve the building or structure. The 1-year period shall begin only when the bona fide effort has commenced. A bona fide effort shall consist of all the following actions. It says all of them. Marking the property for sale or lease, filing an application for alternative funding sources for preservation, such as a Neighborhood Revitalization Act, etc., filing an application for alternative uses if available or feasible, such as rezoning or conditional uses, et cetera, and obtaining written statements from licensed building contractors or architects detailing the actual cost to rehabilitate. I'm not going to go through, and I think the hospital could do a better job, and Mr. Hindenkamp could have telling you what they've done. My point in bringing that up is that if you should choose to say, oh, well, we want to defer this, postpone it for a year, there's kind of different ways possibly you can do that. The recommendation is in the report is that you could simply postpone it, I think, in accordance with the intent of this. However, one thing to think about is if those 4 conditions have been met, the Salina Regional may argue that the time frame has actually started on the postponement because of our extension of time. Again, I think that's a question Mr. Luckman would want to vet out with you, but is something to consider. In other words, it might not be automatic that whenever you should decide to enact that, it's a full year from that point forward. You may already have used up some of that year.
Yeah, but those 4 conditions have not been met.
Well, that's a question I can't address. I don't know. I think, again, that's something that would be something that need to be reviewed based on submittal of information provided by Salina Regional Health Center. I do believe in the statements, at least some of these have been discussed in their statements, but I'm not here to say those have been met or not met. But if they're met, the timing could be different than a year from whenever.
Right.
Okay.
And just one last thing too, and that is to the whole having a Heritage Commission, having an ordinance that states this out. And I would say if this isn't a case for having that ordinance and having that Heritage Commission, then I don't know what is from a building standpoint and from a property owner that has the ability to stand up and do that and preserve what I consider to be a landmark building and of historic and architectural significance. I don't know who in the community would. It just seems to me that it's kind of, we've talked about it on other issues, is that there's sort of a defeatist attitude that we have sometimes, and I think when it comes to old buildings, we have a severe defeatist attitude that we can't do it. And I think there are shining examples, Steeple Theater being one of them, where people rallied together and had the can-do attitude and got it done. And everybody celebrates those successes. So I think this is an opportunity to do that, and I just hope that we're that with enough time and the right person stepping forward, that there's the opportunity to do this. But I would just hope that we might all look at this as something that we can do rather than something we can't do. So anyway, I'm done.
Okay, any other thoughts from any of the other commissioners?
Well, it's also the contract with Comprise. It says it doesn't expire until 1/28/2015. I'm not sure what that means, but they're giving themselves time. Looks like they are.
I believe, as I understand it, I haven't seen any contract other than what the commission has been provided, but the closing is currently scheduled for October 30th, which I believe is the end of any due diligence period. And the 28th, I would understand it just to be that would be a final date on which both parties would be officially released, absent them agreeing to release each other at a different date. So it's just, they know at that point that Salina Regional Health Center knows that they can sell it or tear it down or do whatever they want to do for certain at that date without violating any agreement they had with Comprise. And with the same respect, Comprise can expect that other bidders may be able to obtain the property without having to deal with their contract, it being ahead of them or having to deal with that. So perhaps the more relevant date would be the 30th for another due diligence period or sale or closing of a sale. But in the end, you're correct that the contract doesn't end until January 1 or January 28th, excuse me.
Okay. Anyone else? I would entertain a motion, or unless somebody wants to exercise the closed session that Mr. Luckman discussed, if you want to gather your thoughts, if you have a different thought.
And I'd urge the commission, if there is any action besides extension, I believe that it would be helpful to future review that the facts be determined in some manner and outlined in accordance with what the standards are and what the Heritage Commission found.
Okay.
Did we have a staff recommendation on this? Was it option 1? And if it was option 1, was there any sort of time component to that?
You do have a staff recommendation. Let's see, I'll get to it.
So I see on here it's option 1, but I don't see
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't see
time.
a
It does really the staff indication is that you do have the option. It says the staff would recommend the commission make a finding that while the hospital building is not currently occupied, demolition of what the structure is not required. The structure is not required to alleviate a threat to public health and safety, and that additional time is needed to determine whether it is economically feasible to redevelop or reuse a hospital building, and approve option number 1. And then in the second paragraph after that, it does make reference in the report. Staff would note that the decision to allow or not to allow the demolition of the former St. John's Hospital building on the property must be evaluated on its own merits. So leaves that open, which is what your role would be.
Right. Well, I don't know about you guys, but I would make a motion to move into closed session for 10 minutes to discuss with council findings.
Second.
Is that enough information for you to, I'm so used to our big, long legal,
No, actually, you don't, but you can just state that it's for closed session for the quasi-judicial review of,
Okay.
and I
Do
think
we-
that's exactly what you meant, but
Okay.
do
that's
we
right.
need a time then or no?
Well, no, you wouldn't need to set a deadline or time. It might
Okay.
be helpful.
Just for the
if you-
benefit of
The public?
Yeah, for the benefit of the public, you certainly can. There's no restriction
I
against
can't
it.
imagine we can get anything done in 10 minutes.
Can we get out of here at 10 after 5?
I doubt it.
That's 13 minutes.
And he's an optimist. And
He
so,
is.
yeah.
Well, we're not tied to any time. Let's try to be out of here by 5:15.
What's we don't need a closed session if we're interested in option number 1, correct?
Well, I think we would want to have a finding of facts that was.
Okay.
Yeah,
Would that be?
I think it would be good to have that conversation.
Okay.
Because there may be certain aspects of that you need to discuss.
If 5:15 works for you, let's work with that. Okay.
We'll be as
Quick as we can. Okay, motion and second to go in executive session with hopes to return for our at-home players here at 5:15. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? We're in executive session.
close.
It's a given nowadays that the U.S. does not want to send troops in any large numbers to fight either in.
Okay. We actually got back a little earlier than we thought. That's amazing. Okay, I'll bring it back into the commission for any further discussion or possible action.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'll make a motion, and for those following along, this would be following along with option 1. So, Mr. Mayor, I move that we postpone consideration of this application in order to allow the applicant or any other party to further pursue redevelopment of all or a portion of the property and/or respond to any commission questions for additional actions or information deemed necessary to reach and support a final decision. This action is taken with the understanding that the due diligence process will be completed and contract closed. If these are not met, then at that time the commission will make a decision at that time to accept or decline the demolition permit and reconvene November 17th, 2014.
Second.
Have a motion and a second on this. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That motion carries 5-0. Takes us on to the consent agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Luckman.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Item 6.1, approve the minutes of August 11th, 2014.
I move we approve the minutes
Yeah.
of August 11th, 2014.
Yeah.
Second.
Yeah, motion is second to approve this massive consent agenda. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? That motion carries 5-0. That takes us on to administration.
Item 7.1, second reading, ordinance number 14-10750, calling a special election, submitting to the vote of the electors of the City of Salina, Kansas, in accordance with the initiative and referendum statute, and ordinance repealing ordinance number 7096, which authorized and directed the Water Department of the City of Salina, Kansas, to install and operate equipment which will fluoride the water supply system in the City of Salina, Kansas.
Ordinance number 14-10750 was passed on first reading on August 11th, 2014. Since that time, no comments had been received. Is there anyone here from the audience who would like to speak on this issue today? Sir, please.
Dennis Benoit, 1773 20th Road, outside Canopolis in Ellsworth County. But I was born here, and this is my home. My concern basically is, I'm sure you all have seen this. This is the CDC 2010 Dental Fluorosis Survey. You can get it online, Salina, and follow, but just to double check what I say. On the second page, I'll tell you the worst part. 12 to 15-year-olds have a 40%, a little over 40% chance of having some form of dental fluorosis. That's in the very mild area. But it's still a concern because fluoride is coming from all different directions now. So, also, what is dental fluorosis? Dental fluorosis is on page 5. Take too long, so I'll do a short version. It's the first 8 years of a child's life, first 8 years of a child's life to fluoride. And that basically stipulates, my concern to that is the first 9 months in the mother's womb. If she's eating fluoride-rich foods, if she's drinking Salina tap water, if she's brushing her teeth with fluoridated toothpaste, then she is feeding that unborn child through her placenta fluoride. And then after the child is born, when the first 3 or 5 years, whatever you want to consider that, in November of 2006, there's a consideration you should think of. The American Dental Association recommended to parents, do not mix baby formula with fluoridated water. For 46 years, since the old city commission voted it in 1968, Salina, you have not had a choice. Well, this November the 4th, you will have a choice. Your vote and your voice will be heard by voting yes to stop fluoridation. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else here on this issue? Okay, seeing that, I'll close that public section of that and bring it back to the commission for possible action.
Oh, excuse me, Commissioners, real quick. I want to be careful with, I don't want to get into debate, but right on the CDC's website, there's a statement about fluoride. It's a bigger picture statement. It's not in, I'm not disputing that information that was provided.
Sure.
But what it's talking about is other fluoride products, toothpaste, mouth rinse, things like that. And what it says is, it says in the United States, water fluoridation is not the only form of fluoride delivery that is effective in preventing tooth decay in people of all ages. Use the information listed below to compare the other fluoride products that may lower the risk for tooth decay, especially for people who are at higher risk for decay. Although all of these products reduce tooth decay, combined use with fluoridated water offers a protection greater than any of these products used alone. So anyway, it's a context issue, and I thought, given that information is available on the website actively by the CDC today, it's relevant to that question.
It's good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we adopt on second reading ordinance number 14-10750.
Second.
Motion and a second to adopt on second reading ordinance number 14-10750. If the clerk would please call the roll.
Commissioner Blanchard.
Aye.
Commissioner Crawford.
Aye.
Commissioner Hardy.
Aye.
Commissioner Shirley.
Aye.
Mayor Householder.
Aye. That motion carries 5-0.
Item 7.2, second reading, ordinance number 14-10742, granting an amended telecommunications franchise to Ideatech Telecom LLC, formerly known as Wildflower Telecommunications LLC, a wholly owned subsidiary of Ideatech Systems, Inc.
Ordinance number 14-10742 was passed on first reading on August 11th, 2014. Since that time, no comments have been received. Is there anyone in the audience today to speak on this issue? Okay. Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission for possible action.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we adopt on second reading ordinance number 14-10742.
Second.
Motion is second to adopt on second reading ordinance 14-10742. If I could get a roll on that?
Mayor?
I'm sorry.
May I throw in one quick comment before you go to the vote on the issue, since you have a motion in a second? Just a clarification. In the report last week, we made reference to the administrative permit process and also reference to an extended permit, a special type permit process that, in accordance with the zoning code that you've already approved, that deals with the DAS and deals with really the issues of either being in a residential zone or C4 Central Business District zone. I do want to make a clarification. I don't know that you'll find that it's a big deal, but just to be sure that it's on the record. And the clarification has to do with when it would have to go to the Planning Commission's review or when it could stay as an administrative review. And I want to be clear that if it could stay, it could theoretically stay at an administrative review if in one of the residential districts or the C4 district, but only if it meets all of the performance criteria. The applicant submits a professional engineering analysis which demonstrates that it cannot meet its coverage and capacity requirements by placement in a less restrictive district, and the applicant's proposed antenna will be co-located on an existing pole with permission from the pole owner. So under those circumstances, if they should occur, it still could be dealt with administratively versus following the special permit in the Planning Commission review. So it's more like clarification, but I thought it was important to go ahead and get that on record. Yeah.
Good, thank you. Does that change anyone's motion or second? Okay. And then if I could roll call on that, please.
Sure. Commissioner Blanchard.
Aye.
Commissioner Crawford.
Aye.
Commissioner Hardy.
Aye.
Commissioner Shirley.
Aye.
Mayor Householder.
Aye. That motion carries 5-0.
Item 7.3, second reading, ordinance number 14-10748, levying special assessments against certain lots and pieces of property to pay the cost of abatement of nuisances as amended.
Ordinance number 14-10748 was passed on first reading on August 11th, 2014. Since then, the report has been modified due to a processing error. A number of properties were removed for payments received. The overall amount increased due to adding properties that were not included on the original report. There's an attached report showing amounts billed, paid, and remaining due. The total amount billed was $41,077.15, of which $8,774.01 had been paid. The remaining amount to be assessed is $32,303.14. The certification covers all abatements that were finalized since the 2013 certification. Do I have a motion on that?
I move we adopt on second reading number 14-10748 as amended.
Second.
Motion and a second to adopt ordinance number 14-10748. If I could get a roll call on that.
Commissioner Blanchard.
Aye.
Commissioner Crawford.
Aye.
Commissioner Hardy.
Aye.
Commissioner Shirley.
Aye.
Mayor Householder.
Aye. That motion carries 5-0.
Item 7.4, authorize the mayor to sign and accept the offered sidewalk easement for Lot 17, Block 4 of River Trail Addition.
Mr. Stack. No? What can we say about Mr. Stack?
We lost him at closed session.
Yeah.
Oh, there's an open house. There's an open house at Lakewood Middle School. His daughter's in
In there.
there.
There he
Yeah,
is.
same grade my daughter.
There he is. No, he's right here.
I thought you ran
He's
to
waiting out
Lakewood
there.
real quick.
No, he was just playing with us. He didn't want Dean to feel alone.
I
Yeah.
thought it was
He was waiting to hear what you had to say about him.
Yeah. I said I was trying to come up with something. I couldn't think of anything
If
funny.
we can hurry this
He looks
along,
like my
Mr.
Uncle
Stack,
Terry.
maybe both of us
Watching
can make it.
in my office and answering questions, and
Yeah.
you guys got through a lot faster than I thought you would, so thank you.
Yeah.
All right,
I
this
can
easement-
understand that. Yeah. Truly.
There was a lot going on earlier, so I thought I'd get a few things done up there, but it's on TV, so it's helpful to keep track, so thank you. This is an easement in River Trail, and it's basically a corner of Ben Court and, let me see if I can get my packet pulled up here. Basically just a corner lot that Roger Botka owns, and we were not able to get the sidewalk to fit in there and match the sidewalk ramp, basically. So we were able to work out a situation where the better construction would be to get this easement, and then they could match the sidewalk and the ramp much better. And we actually did this a few months ago with Gary Hecker on the other side of the street, and it worked out well to get the easement and connect to the sidewalk that way. So I guess that's really all this is authorizing, is just the easement that we would accept it and build the sidewalk. Any questions?
Any questions for staff on this? Okay, thank you, Mr. Stack.
Thank you.
Anyone here from the public here to discuss this issue? Okay, seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission for possible action.
Mayor, I move we authorize the mayor to sign and accept the offered sidewalk easement for Lot 17, Block 4 of River Trail Edition.
Second.
Motion is second to offer to accept the offered sidewalk easement for River Trail Edition Lot 17, Block 4. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? That motion carries 5-0.
Item 7.5, adopt 2015 budget and related items. 7.5A, second reading, ordinance number 14-10751, adopting the 2015 budget. Item 7.5B, resolution number 14-7129, establishing various fees for services in the comprehensive fee schedule of the city of Salina, Kansas.
Mr. Franz.
Mayor and Commissioners, thank you. There was a public hearing held on the proposed budget August 11th. At that time, you took public comments on this budget. A comment that nothing has changed. There is a correction to the blue sheet in the sense that the amount listed for the 2014 budget is a mistake. I simply pulled the wrong number off of a table. That should be $72,535,778, which eliminates that $4 million increase that was commented on at the hearing. It's more like $1,683,000, or about 2 3/10%. As I said, the tax levy is going to remain the same, 26.926 mils, same as the final tax levy last year. Taxes themselves levied will increase by about $74,000, or a little bit less than 1%. The second item on the agenda, related item, is Resolution 14-7129. I would ask that you defer consideration of that until next week. Some of the supplemental material that went out with the agenda was less than complete. There were some missing items, and I would like to make sure that you have a full copy of that schedule before we proceed with that. It is not dependent on the adoption of the budget, so that part of the action could be pursued.
Okay.
I'm glad to try to answer any questions.
Any questions for staff? Okay, thank you, Mr. Franz. Anyone here from the public care to comment on this issue? Go ahead. Sure.
Randall Holm, Hometown Realty, Salina, Kansas, 311 East Crawford. That you're talking about possibly postponing till next week, I've got some questions in reference to that as far as various fees and services in the comprehensive fee schedule. I've been lucky enough not to have to request any data records from the police department in recent years, but I've had several friends complain that the cost to get accident reports and that seem excessive to them based on the cost to make copies and the short amount of time to pull something up and print it off with a computer today. I know I have a real problem with the county, not you, as far as county property tax records and that, where they're getting the equivalent of about $72 an hour for the employee and 50 cents a page for copies based on their fee schedule. I just ask that you look real hard at any fee schedules that you're charging the public and be sure that they are truly reflecting the additional cost to a department to provide those, so that we're not making things excessively expensive and trying to make a profit off of the general public, in particular when they're trying to get public records. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to gather, just maybe a question for Mr. Gage. I mean, obviously, paper at 50 cents. I mean, we have, obviously, if you go to Office Max, you can buy a ream of paper and it's X amount of dollars, but we have to get the paper, stock it on those things, so the paper isn't a big concern. I would guess that when we look at those costs, we're averaging out. Some things take longer. One
Yes.
person may show up and it takes 2 minutes to get an accident report. Another person may show up and ask for something that was 3 months ago and may take an hour. Very difficult, probably, to cater down to each individual customer at a time. Is that probably kind of where we come up with these schedules, or?
Yeah, and it's not just about the cost of paper, and certainly not the cost of a computer to do it, because otherwise it'd be much higher. It includes, and the reference in here basically discloses that the above fee includes the first 15 minutes of retrieval time. There could be more time, probably isn't much of the time, so that's probably fairly accurate. And for additional time, there's an additional cost, but it includes that plus any of those other costs. So it is based on an average type situation. It'd be nearly impossible to try to take every one and create an exact fee each time.
Mm-hmm.
So.
I was trying to look on here and see if I could, I don't know if we break it down that detailed, what that
It's
cost.
on the last
costed.
page,
Last
page 39.
Okay. Huh, I usually skip to the last page and read it. Let's take a look here. Oh, there we go. Okay. I'm just curious what it is there.
30 cents a page? Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, and then the
That's normal records. That may not be police records. I don't know.
So that's just normal, Mr. Franz.
Open record.
Yeah.
Yeah, the page 39 are miscellaneous fees.
Yeah, police reports are on page 31.
Oh, okay, thank you.
And there is they do have a slightly different schedule. And as the city manager said, the fee that's set there does include 15 minutes of retrieval time, and which of course some require, some don't, some may require more than that, depending on the request.
Well, one thing, commissioners, to keep in mind that police reports aren't always the typical accident report. I got in an accident, I want to go get my accident report. And that's where the difference is. If there's a criminal situation, there could be multiple pages, there could be video of it, there could be all kinds of different information that is provided. So there's a whole host of different types of information that's provided there.
Could be on there. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I was seeing here $7. I didn't know if there was like some $45 fee. I saw $7 and I wasn't, I mean, it's
kind of to tie kind of the two together there, the general fee, the one that's 30 cents a page, that stuff is generally available online. Would that be accurate?
A lot of our records are available online. Now, the police reports, accident reports, you can get online. I can't speak without looking at this point on other types of reports, but I know accident reports, you can go online, you can actually pay online, you can download those. Many other records, the city in general has codes, ordinances, all kinds of plans, things like that. You can go online and find much of that through the Laserfish option, and there's no charge to access those records.
I would also note that it appears that the open records fee has a copy cost and a research cost, so your total expense is going to be the combination of those two. So it includes a research component above and beyond the 30 cents a page.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Okay. Well, thank you for your comments on that. Any further discussion? If not, I entertain a motion. I'm sorry, anyone else from the public on this issue? I didn't close the public. No? Okay. Then I'll close the public part of this and move it back to the commission for possible action.
I'll make a motion. I just want to thank staff, Rod, Franz, thank you for all the hard work you did on this, and city manager's office, Mike, Jason. And I'd make a motion that, well, if I can find my front of my sheet here, make a motion to, on second reading, adopt ordinance number 14-10751, adopting the 2015 budget.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to adopt ordinance 14-10751, adopting the 2015 budget. If I could get a roll call, please.
Commissioner Blanchard.
Aye.
Commissioner Crawford.
Aye.
Commissioner Hardy.
Aye.
Commissioner Shirley.
Aye.
Mayor Householder.
Aye. That motion carries 5-0.
I think on the second item, Commissioners, if you're fine with giving the Finance Department an additional week, a motion to postpone that item to next week's meeting would be sufficient.
Okay, and that date is
25th.
25th, okay.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we postpone consideration of resolution number 14-7129 until the Monday, August 25th, 2014 meeting.
Second.
Motion is second to postpone resolution number 14-7129 until the August 25th meeting. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That carries 5-0.
Item 7.6, resolution number 14-7130, authorizing the city manager to permit the Muscular Dystrophy Association to solicit within the city's rights-of-way utilizing off-duty Salina firefighters.
Mr. Gage.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. Currently, last year the MDA, Muscular Dystrophy Association, requested authorization from the city to allow its firefighters to solicit funds on their behalf from the city streets. We often refer to the street area as right-of-way. You're probably more familiar with that than the public, and the reason is because the area you control is typically wider than from curb to curb, and includes some other uses. In Kansas, solicitation of public right-of-ways is not allowed per the Standard Traffic Ordinance, Article 11, Section 69C. It says no person shall stand on a highway for the purpose of soliciting employment, business, or contributions from the occupant of any vehicle. Typically, that means if you're outside a curb, you're fine. If you're actually stepping into the street, that's a problem. However, the next section does allow that governing bodies may permit that type of activity, so the state law does give you the discretion. So not long after the conversation about the request, the City Commission directed staff to create a framework for allowing that type of activity within the right-of-way of our community. We were pretty clear from the perspective that you can't just do that with one group. You really have to open up that allowance, that privilege to any group, individual, business entity, whomever it might be that might be interested in that. So we've been working pretty diligently to look at all the legal aspects to that, the implications to that, as well as the question of, as it relates to wearing a city uniform or equipment, to make sure you don't accidentally step into a paid situation because your intent was to make sure that if it's a city employee, that's an unpaid off-duty type activity. And so kind of to go over some of the limitations that were provided by you during the discussion. One is to allow collection of funds from within the driving lane of the street, but to restrict solicitation activities to behind the curb. I will tell you that's a little bit difficult because in a big intersection, the timing of the lights could change, and it's not something we can really monitor. Someone could solicit from the side. A vehicle in the center left turn lane of a wide intersection says, yeah, come get money from me. So the off-duty firefighter or whomever it might be goes to collect that, and if there's a couple others that get a little distracted, signal can change. You could be kind of sort of trapped there and maybe have to hit the thin median strip that's at the left turn lane section. So it's an issue. Point being is I don't know that we can enforce that very strongly. Now, if someone's standing in the middle of the street, stopping people, that's different. Two, all activities associated with the City of Salina employees is to be off-duty. We're very clear there. Salina employees may wear uniform attire and some discretion to allow limited use of vehicles or equipment as long as it doesn't impact service delivery in any way. And all persons taking part must be at least 18 years of age, and you discuss being reasonable and requiring certain safety protocols. So we've been working on all that, and quite honestly, we just can't get the whole broader framework ready in time for the MDA's typical Labor Day type time frame. So what we had done was we recognized it was your intent to try to allow that to happen. We didn't want to defer that a whole additional year, so we asked the MDA and through the firefighters to provide what their plan would be for doing that, and basically submit an application that we could address more individually this year, recognizing that buys us some time to work on the rest of it. We did get an application submitted by Lacey Mills, Executive Director of the MDA Arc Valley Chapter, and that's attached. And real quickly, I'll hit the highlights of that. The requested times for the collection are Friday, September 12th, Saturday, September 13th, and Sunday, September 14th. On Friday, it's from 4 to 7 p.m., Saturday from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m., and Sunday from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. The locations are the intersections of Crawford and Ohio, Crawford and Broadway, 9th and Magnolia. The attire, provide firefighters with MDA Fill the Boot t-shirts to be worn along with safety vests per the safety plan. They're requesting the use of the backup truck to be in the area for the Fill the Boot campaign. Certainly, that wouldn't be able to be out in the street or anything. It would have to be on private property in accordance with the permission granted for that. They do have the attached safety plan as well. Really, I'll get to the safety plan. Staff didn't really see a real concern with the dates, times, locations. Those are pretty consistent with what we'd expect. You may have different thoughts, but typically expect around the weekends, at least 1 or 2 days. And we did anticipate the busier, higher volume intersections because that's where the activity is, that's where the funds will flow. That's also where traffic signals are, and we believe that it's safer to be with traffic signals rather than wondering, whose turn is it to go in a four-way intersection or four-way stop. So that's pretty consistent. With regards to the safety plan, it looks fine. The only issue that we had, it's more of a technical issue that quite honestly the MDA or the firefighters was probably not aware of because you have to dive deep into the Department of Labor regs to get there, but they indicated intersection supervisors, ranking officer on duty, and in order to stay with an unpaid situation in which you're not a sponsor providing any emphasis as an organization to have them do that, not just to enable them, but to sort of push that. We just need to not reflect our rank in that there's no rank associated with this except whatever the MDA, however they want to handle it. But if they reflect the city's rank and therefore those officers are given rank authority, that probably takes you into paying them. We know you don't want to do that. It's a real simple issue that they can correct. So we don't look at it as a big deal or anything they would have recognized. So it's a simple communication. So with that, when looking at this, it appears to be very acceptable with some of the thoughts, if we're going to allow this, that we would expect to have. We don't have any big concerns. A couple things that we did have, one is that they would be required to provide a sticker or some other marker for those who donate, just because it eliminates a lot of awkward feeling if you donate once. You go through and you recognize someone there, may not realize, different person, different intersection, that you already donated, so that's always awkward. So we felt that's a pretty common thing you see anyway. Let's see, really the last issue, this is really the broader issue, not so much relating to off-duty firefighters, but just the whole public issue. We do anticipate that as we create the framework in the future, there probably will be interest that builds. It'll probably be at the similar intersections, probably on weekends, because again, high traffic, that's where you want to be, and during the warm months of the year. It is a distraction to motorists, there's no question, and the issue with that is we do spend a lot of money within engineering design, signalization, markings, geometrics of the intersection, traffic safety education, all those things, and enforcement to try to keep those safe. Normally you would say don't put somebody in there if you don't have to. That's just the general approach. So without question, it's distracting to motorists on busy arterial roadways, and it could create a higher danger than there would otherwise be for participating pedestrians. Quite honestly, it's pretty reasonable to determine that the danger is probably less in this particular case when you're dealing with off-duty firefighters. Police officers are probably the most comfortable working in the streets as far as city employees. Firefighters and public works folks are probably right behind there. But it doesn't take away the hazards that are out there, and there are hazards out there. Anyhow, the assumption on the safety is probably a bigger issue when you think of a nonprofit group in the future that may wish to participate and do that. So just something to keep in mind. We would have to apply the same privilege to them as we would to an off-duty firefighter. From a fiscal perspective, no cost or other fiscal impact with this action, really, just staff time. It's not too big a deal. So we have a couple alternatives, pretty straightforward. Approve the resolution that's attached, authorizing the city manager to permit the MDA to solicit within the city's right-of-way utilizing off-duty Salina firefighters. And that's in accordance, the resolution is very specific. That'll be in accordance with the plan provided with a couple changes we mentioned. Do not approve the resolution at this time. Certainly you always have an option to modify if you would like a modification to that. So be happy to answer questions for you and see if we can help.
Any questions for staff? So, Mr. Gage, you were saying that do we need to make note of that in our motion or for this ranking situation?
It's in the resolution.
Yeah, it's in the resolution.
It's in the it's okay.
The resolution
draw out the resolution.
That issue.
That was just a change from what letter was sent in.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and we can then communicate that. Like I said, it should be very simple for them.
Okay, great. Thank you. Anyone from the public here to comment on this issue? Okay, thanks. Bring it back to the commission for possible action.
I am in favor of the firefighters collecting for muscular dystrophy. It's a historical kind of activity, happens around Labor Day weekend, and it's related to the bigger drive. I have more of an issue with allowing any and all other groups that might be interested in collecting funds at our intersections. I have a feeling that also that it would not just be a safety issue, but it would also put drivers at unease, if you want to put it that way. You know, to throw something in a boot, everybody is okay with that. I would guess. I would be okay with that. But in terms of other types of groups that you're not familiar with or that you don't generally support, you might put you in an awkward situation. So I have an issue with that, and if that's the only alternative I have, I don't know that I feel comfortable supporting it.
I feel very similar to you. I believe it's dangerous, and I think if we do this, we have to allow, you know, anybody that may come along. And I think this is a great. I mean, who doesn't want to support MDA? But I don't think I'm in favor of it. So
My thoughts are, I would hope that our drivers, I think that's such a tradition, I would hate to see it not happen. I appreciate the thought that other people would do this. I would hope that, I don't want to discourage people from donating to worthy causes if there are other causes. I would hope that other organizations out there would come up with their own. I know each organization kind of has bowling, and I would just, and I know that they're not required to once we pass this. They could go to the streets. I would just hope that they would exercise good judgment and not sort of trample into muscular dystrophy sort of area, and perhaps even donors could maybe be a little more, you know, understand our plight and understand that by donating to every group that shows up on the corner, they make it more of a problem, and maybe they're a little more discerning with only supporting traditionally groups who do boots on the street, or groups that do boot filling on the street. I just hate to see it not happen. There's so many cities and across this country that do this. I would hate to see us not do it. But again, I would just hope that other organizations wouldn't abuse what we've made possible for one organization and use a little bit better judgment. I know we can't require them to. I just hope that they would be a little more conscious of that.
I don't think other communities in Kansas really have other, I know lots of them do fill the boot. I don't think a lot of them go out and do other things in the middle of the street like the firefighters do, and I would believe Salina would do the same thing. You know, they would just have the firefighters out there, not everyone jump on the bandwagon and hand their boots out for this group or that group. You don't see that happening in other communities.
That is true.
Yeah.
Commissioners, I could be wrong, and it's very anecdotal, but I would imagine that where the firefighters do this, the other communities don't even at all communicate the right to those other organizations, and they probably don't have a clue that they have the same right and could do that. And the attractiveness is on a busy, maybe fall or spring day, nice day, on a weekend at the busiest intersection in town. That's probably an easy $5,000 to $10,000 that you didn't have last year. My concern has always been in Salina, we have very active nonprofits. Fact is, we have some of the best nonprofits I've seen in any community that I've been in. We truly do. They're active. They're always looking at different ways. So you could have a bowl-a-thon, but why not pick up a few extra dollars with this? So what I can't tell you how many would do this and how long it would take to build to a certain number. I really don't know. But what I can say is that we do, as a legal right, have to offer it not only to nonprofits, to for-profits, to individuals, without regard to how the proceeds are used. That's just part of the legal aspect of how we have to deal with the right-of-way. And so we really don't know, but it's hard to tell.
And Mayor and Commissioners, if I may, on a strictly legal basis, if we're going this direction with what is a public forum, the street, and the right-of-way, I do need to caution us against sanctioning a particular use by a particular organization as opposed to others, even just suggesting that others shouldn't is doing so.
So everybody should go out and just do what you want to do.
No.
Provided you're following the legal boundaries.
We need to recognize that we are opening a public forum and that the law does not allow us to distinguish between those who access that public forum.
Sure, sure.
And if I could just address the resolution at hand is for this specific use, which they have specific guidelines that they are following and that we are following with the use of our employees as well. But if we're looking at this, would it be reasonable to assume that if somebody wanted to do this again, that they would approach the city and seek a resolution to use that, or what's the... Or is this resolution just in lieu of perhaps something down the road more concrete, since we don't have something in place?
Yeah, the resolution is really an interim measure just to address the timing of this particular event, which we saw on the radar screen. So yeah, we would move forward with trying to create a broader framework of some sort that any of the others who are interested could fall into. So in that case, what we would probably do is bring you a resolution at some point that addresses the broader framework, and then that would be the last one we need to bring, unless there's some exception being requested.
Right. And that would include your insurance issues and
yeah,
and
we
all
would
those.
create a permit process
Right.
and ask for the administrative ability to deal with each one, and again within those the structure and the parameters.
Right. And to the point that this is a interim resolution, I think that I can tell you that the concerns that I had were addressed in this, and that I think that they're adequately covered in here, and so I'm fine with this resolution.
Okay.
I think that the one comment that Mr. Gage made about this being an opportunity for nonprofits to raise an extra $5,000, perhaps in a weekend, may bring nonprofits to our door, maybe more than we would like to see, and possibly make, when they're all of these groups are concentrated during the warm months of the year, and perhaps on important weekends, and I just don't feel comfortable with that scenario.
Well, I think that at that point, if there's an abuse, I think at that point we certainly have the prerogative to pass an ordinance or the resolution to
rescind it.
Yeah, to say, okay, never mind.
Yeah, the interesting question is, what is an abuse? If an abuse is a lot of interest, you're really, you're in a position that either you offer it to all under the same rules or you don't at all. And I think that's the issue. I would define an abuse as not following the rules that we provide in front of them. And certainly, that would be a concern, because that would even elevate the hazards that are already there. What we're probably looking at is and we need to communicate the ability to others. It would not be fair for us to hide that communication and allow one entity to do it each year. Some would argue that there's more of a right, even though there isn't legally, but practically more of a right for those with a local an office presence and other presence to have the ability to do it than an entity that does great things, but is a national entity that doesn't really have a direct local presence. They'd certainly have an indirect impact. Some would argue those practical thoughts on the matter. So I just anticipate we will get some interest. If I've been on some nonprofit boards, I'm not currently right now, but if I was, I would say, if you're hurting for funding, this is an opportunity. You don't have to like it, but it's pretty easy. Why wouldn't you do it?
Would it be fair to say that having this as a resolution, an interim thing, that we kind of get a test drive?
Yeah, I think so. And again, you're going to be, the resolution limits the participants to only off-duty Salina firefighters. So what you do pretty much get a test drive. You don't get a test drive with those that aren't off-duty Salina firefighters, those that are a little bit more familiar with working in that area. That's probably the only difference that you have. But as far as the dates, the locations, maybe how the public takes it,
that was
that type
mainly
of
my
thing.
concern,
Sure.
how well accepted it would be that people feel
I think absolutely
solicited.
So we're looking at two resolutions, one for the MDA drive and one for all other drives that might follow.
Well, I guess this resolution is specific to this year's request only. just because the broader framework is not in place. Once the broader framework is in place with the resolution, it would be an administrative staff permit process, maybe pending a request for an exception, and so that would be the last resolution you would have unless you should choose to rescind that type of action in the future.
This resolution would be our last resolution? No.
In the future, you will have a resolution that provides your framework for all other entities who want to do it. And that resolution would be expected to create an administrative process for staff to review based on the parameters you provide in that resolution. And that would be the last one you would likely have.
And so this resolution expires after Labor Day?
Yeah, this is just for this request only, for this year only. That's correct. And I want to be clear, too. I have to tell you that there's a hazard to allowing this. I can't measure it. There is a hazard anytime you encourage anyone to be in an area where cars are driving at pretty decent speeds. There's a lot of cars. There's a hazard. There's no question. But I also will tell you that whatever you'd like to do, we commit, we always do, that we will do it the best that we can to make sure it's that based on our role, it's successful. That's what we do. So, keep that in mind.
Okay. So anyone with possible action on this?
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve resolution number 14-7130, authorizing the city manager to permit the Muscular Dystrophy Association to solicit within the city's right-of-way, utilizing off-duty Salina firefighters.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to adopt resolution 14-7130. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Nay.
Okay.
Or aye.
That's fine. That carries 4-1. Thank you. That moves us on to, I guess that we just, one last development business.
Item 8.1, application number Z13-9, requesting amendment of the surfacing requirements for off-street parking and driving areas in Article 11, Division 2, Section 42-552E2 of the Salina Code. Item 8.1A, first reading, ordinance number 14-10745.
Mr. Andrew.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. We'll start out with the first question. Where did this come from? The zoning ordinance, the City of Salina, can be initiated, a text amendment to change that can be initiated by you, the governing body. It can be initiated by the Planning Commission on their own, or a business or property owner who's affected by a regulation can file an application to change a regulation. This particular application was initiated by the Planning Commission, and it came out of three things: the adoption of the new comprehensive plan in 2010, came out of discussions about gateways into the community and discussion about overlay districts, and then it came out of frustration and some confusion by planning commissioners who were hearing cases, particularly conditional use permit cases, and particularly in the field of the mini warehouse or mini storage projects. They continually had a hard time wrapping around the concept of when paving of driving aisles and parking areas was required and when they were not, and why we had some mini storage facilities that had gravel aisles and some had paved aisles. And so that is what initiated it, and then what they asked us to do was to do a review or comprehensive survey of other Kansas communities and what their surfacing requirements were. And what we found and reported was that most communities in the state of Kansas do not craft their parking lot surfacing standards based on geography or based on what zoning district you're in. They just have a community standard, and that's the standard across the board, and it doesn't matter if you're residential, commercial, industrial, or what you're zoned. That is the standard for driveway and parking lot surfacing. So that is what the Planning Commission started with. They were also concerned, as were some members of city staff, that we actually had a brand-new building constructed on a lot that had a gravel parking lot, and when they were done with the project, they still had a gravel parking lot because the triggers that we had were not sufficient, that building a building alone was going to cause a parking lot to be converted. So the Planning Commission wanted to look at expanding the triggers as to when an existing gravel lot would have to be paved. So that is where we started. That is what the text amendment was that they initiated. There was a first public hearing. At that first public hearing, there was quite a bit of comment, primarily from property owners and those involved in the process of industrial development in industrial property, and they were primarily concerned about our industrial districts, and they were primarily concerned about having that exemption eliminated and the breadth of what that requirement would be. So John, are you turned on here, and can you go to the first slide, which is the current paving exemptions? So this is where the Planning Commission started, and this is where the community's been since 1990. And so today, under the current ordinance, residential driveways for existing homes, existing duplexes, even for new construction, your approach at the street has to be paved, but you have the option, if you wish, to have a gravel or rock driveway. If you have a duplex with 4 spaces or a triplex with 6 spaces, that can currently be gravel. If you have a permitted use, you're operating in an agricultural zoned area, that can be gravel or rock. And if you are a use in an I2 or I3 zoned area, then you can have gravel or rocked parking. If you're in multifamily housing, if you're a school or a church, new park and recreation facilities, and you have more than 6 spaces, your property, then all of that must be paved. All of our commercial zones require all the parking areas and driveways, maneuvering areas to be paved. And then there's an I-1 industrial park district, and property that is in that area is required to have paved parking. So for example, there is a fairly new Broadway mini storage facility. It's on Centennial Road. It's on the east side of the road. It's across the street from the KSU Salina campus. That property is zoned I-1 Industrial Park, and therefore the developer of that facility had to pave all the access roads and aisles and provide front yard landscaping. If he had been in a slightly different area that was zoned I-2, he could have done it with gravel or rock or asphalt millings. And so that is the primary distinction. Any area that has a gravel parking lot that was in existence on December 17th, 1990, that is grandfathered in, as long as you don't make any changes to your property. If you've got a house that has a gravel lot, you're grandfathered in. If you have a business that has a gravel lot, you don't make any changes, you're grandfathered in. And so we have some current paving triggers, and they have had almost no impact on getting gravel lots converted or upgraded to paved lots. So the Planning Commission's first public hearing, there was a lot of concern from the industrial development community, so they decided that they wanted to form a committee to study that, and as I indicated, there was no intent that it was in a balanced community-wide committee. It was a committee that was designed to focus on what the impact would be on our industrial areas of this change. So you've seen the makeup of that committee. It also included 3 planning commissioners, and they held 3 meetings, and they concluded when they were done that the I-2, I-3 exemption should remain, and that was the committee's recommendation. That's what the Planning Commission ultimately recommended, was that the current paving exemption for I-2 and I-3 zone property would be retained. So John, if you could go to our I2, I3 zoning map. So again, this is our pattern in the community. This is the UP rail line that goes through. You've got Santa Fe, you've got 9th Street, you've got Ohio. And if you think about Ohio Street, there's actually quite a bit of Ohio Street from North Street going north, what has industrial zoning on the frontage. And the same with Broadway over here. And then you have a concentration of I2 and I3 zoning out in the airport area. And then this is property that is primarily undeveloped, but this is Crestwood Cabinets. Right here you have the Kennedy & Co. and the Sunflower Bank. And this area is designated for industrial development, but is mostly undeveloped. John, if you could go to the industrial parking lot paving diagram. So one thing that there's a lot of discussion about at the Planning Commission meeting that they were somewhat confused about, that the committee focused on, and I believe that both the committee and the Planning Commission understood, was that we are talking about parking lots and driveways, and those are where customers and visitors and employees park. In the residential setting, it's where residents and visitors park. It is not work areas or storage areas, or I've got fleet vehicles, or I've got inventory, or I've got supplies that I'm bringing into my building as part of my fabrication process. The intent is not to focus on the surfacing back here, but rather to say, this is a place that has the frequent trips in and out. This is the place that is between the building and the street and forms the streetscape. This is the area we're talking about. Today, under the current ordinance, if you're an I2 or I3 and you put in employee parking lot there, that can be gravel or rock. And the initial proposal by the Planning Commission was that that would no longer be the case, but that would be paved. And so the committee, again, as I noted, met 3 times. One of the concerns was what we could talk about as unintended consequences, that, well, you're talking about this, but if you pass this, are you going to require all industrial facilities to pave all these areas back here? The answer is no. We are just focusing, this is a regulation that deals with driveways and parking lots and maneuvering areas that are used every day by customers, employees, and visitors. And then, John, if you could go to the major industrial projects. One of the things you have in your packet, and I did this primarily because when I use the term major, almost all the businesses on this list, except with one exception, were ones that applied for and received industrial property tax abatement of some kind, either through industrial revenue bonds or constitutional tax exemption. And so we just went through this to prepare you in terms of the impact. And what this tells you over here is why the parking lot was surfaced how it was. And the first one was the Catron, or Premier Pneumatics property up on North Front. They have a paved parking lot for employees and customers, and that was required when that developed because they were in the Northeast Industrial Park overlay. So even though they were zoned I2, they were required to pave their lot because of the covenants there. The Great Plains Manufacturing built a brand new corporate headquarters on East North Street on I3 zone property, and they paved it by their own decision, not because the I3 zoning required it. ADM Milling up on East Pacific, they're also I3. They have a paved parking lot, and they did so of their own decision. Coronado Engineering closed their doors, but is now operated by Geoprobe. But when they developed that property, they had paved surfacing, and that is out in the Airport Industrial Center. Power Ad on Scanlon is zoned I-1, so that is the source of their paving. A-Plus Galvanizing on North Ohio, they're I-3, but they paved all their aprons and their required parking areas. El Dorado National that we discussed last meeting, the area where customers, employees, and visitors park is paved, and they are a part of the Airport Industrial Center. The same with Ovation Cabinetry. Vidrickson Distributing is out there. They are zoned I-1, which required them to pave. Turbine Specialties, or now Cooper Cameron, they're paved because they're I-1. Salina Vortex is a recent project. They're I-3, but they paved their lot. And Bergkamp out on Schilling Road, but off of Emulsion Drive, they did a large expansion out there, and all of their customer and employee parking is gravel. Grain Belt Supply has mixed gravel and paving. FedEx has paved parking. Twin Oaks Industries on West Grand has a mixture. And Veris, which is under construction, is paving their area. And then the Bulk Solids Research Center has mixed gravel and paving. So if you look at that, you'll see that you'll find quite a bit of I-2 and I-3 zoning, and the choice was to pave. So the question might be asked, what is the impact if it's already being done? What are we trying to address? Well, it's not so much the major facilities. There's lots of I-2 and I-3 zone property, some on West State Street, some on Broadway, some in the older on North Santa Fe and Pacific, where you do have a prevalence of gravel lots. And so that was the primary target or focus of that. So we wanted to, as we focus on our industrial facilities, our conclusion was that many of them were already doing it, so that this wasn't a big change. But that is not the reaction that was resulted in the formation of the committee, or the way the committee viewed it, or the way the Planning Commission ultimately viewed it. And then, John, if you could go to slide 7, which was the draft amendment, and scroll up just a little bit. Keep going up. So the this language right here is what was in the ordinance that was before you on first reading, and basically the committee and the Planning Commission, when they were done, this was their recommendation, and that was that if you are a residential dwelling and you're on an unpaved street, or you build a driveway that is coming off an unpaved alley, and we do have many properties where there's rear access off an alley, then if the alley or street's not paved, then it wasn't really equitable to require the property owner to pave. And then the other exception was to maintain I-2 and I-3 zone property, that would be a matter of choice. And then if you could go to slide 5, John. And this was in your packet last time, but these were something, and these things are available as options as part of today's action or direction to staff. We discussed with the committee and with the Planning Commission various qualifying language to provide assurances in the ordinance that areas used for storage of equipment or service vehicles could be surfaced with gravel, asphalt millings. That's the way it's been since 1990. Even we have commercial zoned areas where a contractor has a storage yard for equipment, and that is allowed to be gravel or asphalt milling. So there was no change in that. The focus has always been on the area where customers, visitors, and the public park and come and go. If you could keep scrolling up, John. Another option that was thrown out was, say, instead of having a requirement that just eliminated the exemption, is saying that in I-2 and I-3, if you had a property and you had customer employee parking and it was in front of the building, that would have to be paved. If you had employee or other parking behind the building, then there was less concern, and that can continue to be unpaved. But those were exceptions or qualifying language that was discussed but not incorporated into any kind of recommendation. And so, based on your action last week where you postponed consider this so you could review the materials and put together your questions and comments and give direction to staff, we just wanted to clarify what the original intent of this when the Planning Commission started was, let's get rid of these exemptions and just have a community standard. And that's where it started. And the intent was always just to apply it to places where residents, customers, employees, the public parks on a daily basis. They thought that based on their review of other communities that would put us in the mainstream of what our peer communities are doing, so we weren't out of step. And then we put in your packet and showed you here that an illustration of what an industrial site looks like in the area that this would apply to and not apply to, in case there was any confusion about that. And then we provided you with that summary that just showed who out there has paved and who has not paved in terms of our major industrial facilities. And so we're really at a point where we are open to any guidance that you have if you want to proceed as we have described. One thing we need to do is see if we can address concerns commissioners and the development community has. We are certainly prepared as a staff to do anything in terms of additional revisions or clarifications or definitions or anything that would help with that, and we're certainly, all staff is available today to have any questions you have generated between last week and this week to try to answer those. And so if we provided a number of options for you on page 5, but we wanted to give you the additional week so you could digest this, come up with any questions. One thing that was difficult last week was knowing which questions to ask, because we threw a lot of information at you in a compressed way. So we are open to questions, or we've got photographs, we have other material if you want us to call something up and put it on the screen.
Okay. Any questions for staff?
It is my understanding that on that list of projects since 1990, all of the projects associated with the airport authority are negotiated so that paving ends up being included as part of the package that is arrived at with a potential tenant.
Well, and I cannot speak to the individual cases that we've cited there in terms of whether they are purchases and there are deed covenants or whether there are lease provisions, but it's our understanding that how the parking lot surfaced and other things are a matter of negotiation that's between the Airport Authority Board and the business entity, whether that's part of a lease or part of a deed or transaction, that it's approved by the Airport Authority Board. But I just wanted to clarify that the property out at Salina Vortex, all of their customer and employee parking is paved. It's not paved because the city's zoning ordinance requires it to be paved. It's paved for another reason, either because the business chose to or because that was a condition of their transaction with the Airport Authority.
Any other questions for staff?
Yeah, one thing you had Just for clarification on the list that you had up there, you said all but one of the places on the list were participating in either an IRB or a tax abatement or rebate program with the city?
That is correct. The one that's not, the Great Plains Manufacturing, their corporate headquarters, because that building is not used for any industrial or manufacturing process, it's not eligible for a constitutional property tax abatement, but all the other facilities listed there receive something either through industrial revenue bonds or through what we've referred to as a constitutional tax abatement, where a portion of their property tax is abated.
Now, one of the projects that wasn't up there was Great Plains Manufacturing, the big, long building they did.
Yes, the S1 building.
Right, and that's paved and gravel.
All of their, for the most part, parking for employees is paved, but when they do have a number of staging areas, and they have gone in and done things. There have been gravel areas that they've inherited that they have paved, but you are correct that they did a project over here, the S5 project, and they actually, instead of adding paving, they actually built a building over some existing paving. But I primarily used their corporate headquarters building because it is zoned I3, but it's a frequently used parking lot, and they paved it not because the I3 zoning required it or the city zoning code required it, because they chose to pave it.
Right, and that longer building back there did participate in some incentive type.
There was a major addition here, and there was one associate. They had one addition that they did not qualify for an exemption because they did not have a net increase in employment.
Right. Okay.
Now, none of these properties, though, that received tax abatement or IRB assistance, there was no direct connection between those requests and any particular question about paving.
That is correct. And again, that we've had the same essential property tax exemption resolution and formula since around 1990, and there's never been a linkage between development standards and the abatement. But as you are aware, that all of our incentives are being looked at, including that one, and that is certainly not an unreasonable thing to include as part of criteria for an exemption.
And on the list on the list of the communities, and you had mentioned that they didn't look at geographically where they were or zone-wise where they were. It was a community-wide standard.
Yeah, they simply, when you look at their off-street parking surfacing standards, they didn't differentiate. They just had a section that said, this is how parking areas shall be surfaced in this city, and it did not differentiate between residential or commercial or industrial. They just have a single standard.
But in those communities, they allow gravel in some of the areas that we're discussing, and storage areas.
That's correct. Some of the examples of qualifying language that we put up, one of the communities we researched was the city of Manhattan. Their language says that all parking areas for employees, visitors, residents has to be paved with asphalt or concrete. However, work areas, staging areas, storage areas, those areas may be surfaced with gravel or asphalt millings, but it's actually, their language is in the ordinance so that it's clear that the paving standard does not apply to storage or staging or those type of areas. And as I have explained, having arrived at the conclusion that I-2 and I-3 should be exempt from the paving standard altogether, there wasn't a reason to have the qualifying language for storage. And that's because if paving is not required for parking, then it's certainly not required for the other areas.
As it applies to residential, I know in 1990 our commercial code said if there was a 50% change in, I guess, remodeling or a 30% gain in size, that triggers a paving process in which those are. Is that the same on a residential? Has that always been the case since 1990, or?
No, that is proposed as part. It's
of
part
this change, right?
change.
Okay, that's what I thought.
What was based on was that in 1994, the city adopted landscaping regulations for front yard landscaping, and so, for example, the building where Bennington State Bank is currently located at the corner of Ohio and Belmont and Oxford. That site, 100% of the site, curb to curb, was asphalt. There wasn't any vegetation on that property at all. They went in and did a renovation that was equal to 160% of the value of the existing building. They didn't add any square footage, but since they exceeded 50% of the appraised value, they were required to go in and do some retrofitting that provided landscaping, and that's why you see what you see today. And so the Planning Commission said that seems to work, it seems to be understood by everybody. They suggested using the same thing. So if I've got a gravel parking lot and I go in and do a renovation and it's more than 50% of the value of what's there, then that triggers upgrading the gravel to paving, just as it would go from no landscaping to landscaping.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for staff? Oh, sorry.
Speaking of the part you had mentioned about gateway overlays and other overlay districts, how many exist today, and where are they?
We formerly had 2, and John, if you want to go to that I-2, I-3 map. Today, partially a result of this industrial zoning and the effort and expense that was put into the North Ohio Railroad overpass, there is a North Ohio Gateway Overlay District that applies starting at I-70 all the way down to North Street. And what that overlay district says, if you're in the overlay district, even if you're zoned I-2 or I-3, all of your front yard parking and driving areas have to be paved if you're in that overlay. Right. And then the other overlay that we had was over at North Street, York Street, Front Street, over just east of Ohio. That's the urban renewal area for the city. The idea being if we're going to take this property, clear it, and try to raise the appearance of the area, it was the covenants that were in the Northeast Industrial Park that if you develop property there, even if you were I-2 or I-3, you had to pave. And so that's why Catron, Premier Pneumatics, the old Rima Bakeware building, if you drive up there, you'll see almost entirely paved parking. Those covenants have expired, so they are no longer in effect. So we're basically down to this North Ohio overlay district. So as you heard last week, and also we heard it at committee and planning commission meetings, their approach was if you're concerned about the appearance on arterial streets or certain gateways, then exercise that through adoption of an overlay district, but leave the general exemption in place.
Well, I think what was also kind of bantered about was that somehow the El Dorado gravel lot would not be permitted, but that's really not the case. Is that correct?
And that's what we were trying to clarify. It was our belief as a staff that the committee understood that, and certainly the planning commission understood that. John, if you go to the parking lot paving diagram, and again, we don't, this is just a generic, not that one, just the generic one, that this is a storage lot or staging area. You've got supplies, fabrication, inventory, things like that. It's not used for vehicles coming and going on a daily basis. It's not in the front yard area between the street, and it was not the intent originally of the Planning Commission to address this area, nor is it the intent now. The focus was here. So when we were looking at some of the specific areas, we were focusing on the employees come to work there, visitors come there, customers come there, and their cars are coming and going on a daily basis, and that was the focus.
Dean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the South 9th Street overlay district also requires paving.
It does require paving, but within the city, all of the property is already zoned commercial. The county does have some on the east side, but all of the overlay that's within the city limits is all zoned commercial anyway.
Any other questions for staff? Thank you, Mr. Andrew. I'll open this up to the public. It looks like we've got some people. I hope you stuck around to talk about this. Otherwise, you sit through a really boring meeting. So please, if you have something to address on this issue, come forward. State your name and address, if you would, please. And again, we'll remind you, we're just going to allow one comment per, so no rebuttal comments, if you will. Not necessarily, not picking you out. I'm just saying in general. So
Then please allow me to give my entire comment, and I'll try to get it all done in one essence. Okay, the real question before the commission today is whether it is correct or a smart move for the city to force a private property owner to spend an extra $3,000 to $30,000 or more in paving costs the next time that owner is considering making major improvements to their property. I feel that the 1990 code in reference to this is working fine and is already intrusive enough or too intrusive in some ways. The current code can address deficit maintenance. If you feel gravel's unattractive because it's not being maintained properly, that can currently be addressed through current codes and regulations. We don't have to totally remove the potential for remove the potential for permeable parking. And when I say permeable parking, I'm talking the various forms of non-hard surfaced paving. Every time we turn around, government seems to want to take away our personal choices and rights, and that is simply wrong where it is not absolutely necessary. I have been involved in selling and rehabilitating properties in Salina since 1975 as an investor and as a real estate salesman broker. I feel that this change in many instances will accomplish just the opposite of what your plan claims it wants to accomplish. I feel that it will cause many properties that do not meet your ideas as attractive enough to stay distressed properties longer, due to the potential additional immediate cost to those that might otherwise choose to improve them or buy them to improve them. I also feel that this movement has the potential to lower property values of properties with gravel or permeable paving, and I don't think that's good. On the way here today, I drove down 9th Street from Crawford to this building, and I noticed just as many deficit hard surface paved driveways that looked rough, maybe even more than I noticed the gravel driveways. I personally don't find gravel parking automatically unattractive like some members in this community and maybe some members on the commission do. I can state a number of properties that I would not have purchased or that my buyers would not have purchased for the amounts we paid, if at all, if we had been required to immediately hard pave all the non-hard paved parking that they had, or if gravel had not been an option for additional paving, because we were planning on making improvements to the property. This means that the seller will potentially have fewer dollars to invest in their next home for either the down payment or for the changes and improvements they might want to do to it if they don't get as much money for the property they've got for sale. I'm also, if they can sell it at all, I'm also in favor of continuing to allow gravel, permeable paving, to be used as a paving method within the city, as I feel it is more ecologically friendly and intelligent. I feel that this new code will decrease potential property value for those owners that own properties that have gravel driveways because of the proposed changes, because the new owners will be limited on what they can do to the property without that cost of having to hard pave the currently acceptable paving to them. I feel that because of this potential mandate that fewer individuals will be willing to invest in property that needs updating, remodeling, and improvements because of that additional immediate cost if they make those kind of improvements. It is not unusual for $10,000 to $15,000 in renovation and remodeling costs to increase the value of a $35,000 to $45,000 home by 50% or more, without adding any additional square footage to it. Dollars spent on that kind of repairs and renovations often get a $2 to a $3 return on the investment. In other words, there's motivation to spend dollars to improve something because you get more of a return than you're investing if you invest those dollars wisely. Regretfully, adding a concrete driveway where there was a gravel driveway often only has a return of 50 cents to $1 per dollar spent at the most, and sometimes even less than that. In other words, people aren't, as a whole, turned totally off by gravel parking if it's decent gravel parking. That paved parking doesn't add the cost of the paved parking automatically to the value of the property. I heard it said by city officials, the Chamber of Commerce, and many other individuals in Salina that one of the problems our city faces is a lack of affordable housing, and that this decreases our desirability to new industries and individuals that are considering our city as a place to move to. Yet it seems like every time that we consider any code changes, that they are usually too many items that are being changed that, in my opinion, did little, if any, real good and only increased the cost of housing in our city. It is the city's responsibility to deal with safety and health concerns in our city codes, but it is not right for a city to over-exercise the right to write and enforce codes that overly restrict private property rights with no real gain in health or safety or other gains. Our city now requires flood impact studies prior to new development and often requires the installation of flood control holding ponds because concerns about the extra runoff created by new development and hard paving. We need to be concerned about the additional runoff from the current gravel paving areas if they have to be hard paved, as most of them are in areas where surface flooding is already an issue, and their storm and sanitary sewers are interconnected. Individuals in many of those neighborhoods are already having to deal with sewer backups when there are major storms. If there is additional hard paving in their neighborhoods, those problems will only increase. Why force changes that property owners may not want or may not need when we currently have codes in place to get deficit parking improved? There are a lot of communities around America that have recognized that hard paving for all paving is not appropriate or environmentally friendly. I was real happy to hear Dean Andrews comment that the city of Manhattan doesn't require hard surface paving in all instances, residential included, if I understood him right.
I was talking about the storage area.
Right, but storage areas can involve parking, correct?
There would be vehicles or equipment that could be stored there.
Right. So they do allow it in residential areas because they allow it in all of their zoning codes.
There are some exceptions for residential Manhattan.
Okay. Whereas what is currently being proposed will totally eliminate non-hard surfaced new paving in the community, and it will also retroactively require, if you make improvements to your property, that you get rid of all paving that is permeable and replace it with hard surface or remove it, if I understand the current code. There are a lot of communities, as I said, that are looking at it for both that it's not appropriate and that it's not environmentally friendly. It increases polluted runoff, which can end up in combined storm sanitary sewers, and both the additional volume and treatment needs increased sewer plant operation costs needlessly. Some here view gravel parking as ugly, yet I've seen forms of it used very attractively in many communities and even in many upscale communities. Boulder, Colorado, or not Boulder, Aspen, Colorado. Mr. Householder, I think, commented on a large paved area that was gravel instead of hard paved last week.
Loveland. Yeah, it was Loveland.
Oh, Loveland. I stand corrected on the community. I heard you wrong. I visited communities, upscale communities around the country where they're putting in $3 to $10 million homes with permeable paving. Permeable paving is really the most environmentally friendly form of paving. There's less of a carbon footprint involved in creating it. There's less of a carbon footprint involved in maintaining it. It is probably the move of the future. You can do it in many ways, some less attractive than others, some much more attractive than others. We already have codes that, if enforced, can address the issues created by poorly maintained gravel parking. So why is there need to totally abolish it? I ask that you vote down this move because of that. You've already recognized, and the Planning Commission recognized, the need to recognize the right of the private property owner on industrial properties to be able to have permeable parking and permeable paving on their property for at least some uses. I think it is only fair to continue that right to the rest of our citizens who make up the vast majority of property owners within the community. I ask that you vote no on this. Are there any questions to me from you?
Thank you. Appreciate it, Mr. Drum. Anyone else on this issue? Oh, of course.
Hi. Dennis Benoit, 1773 20th Road outside Canopolis, Ellsworth County. I would hope you could just remember one thing. That list, was that everybody on there, pretty much everybody on there? Were they getting a tax abatement from the city, basically?
Yeah. I don't know that we went into the specifics. I know
was that
we
list of
we
all
talked
the-
about they were doing the IRBs, but I don't.
Or tax abatements.
The basis for the list, I started with a list of all the industrial projects who had received property tax abatement.
Oh, is that it?
Okay. That's what I...
For the Great Plains corporate.
Okay, well, I would like to open it up to allow the other businesses. Please ask them whether I'd rather see you keep it as a business choice, because a couple of them there did make the choice to go ahead, and that maybe that was wise on their part, but let them decide. And as far as the residential, well, on the business side, don't forget the cost. We would be setting a standard should we do that. Okay, on the residential side, cost is again another issue. My uncle owns a house in the north end, and for over 20 years he shared the circle drive with our aunt next door. Back at one point, what are the costs involved? Now, as far as I know, just about nobody came visiting, and it wasn't traffic, it wasn't congested, anything like that. It was just a circle drive. My uncle was given 2 spots to park, and I would park next to his truck for years. Well, that's changed, but my aunt died, and so everything changes. But there was nothing wrong with that gravel circle, and I'm just wondering if the people living next door to his house now, what is the increased costs, and would that benefit? They're not having a lot of traffic, and if it's well kept up, let that be the residents' choice to do that. If that's what they would want, according to their finances, then let them have that option. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Cheryl Musfelt, 1035 Merrily Circle. I agree with Mr. Holm. I'm asking you to vote no on this issue, as well as my husband Ron. We don't agree. We believe that the citizens that already have gravel should be able to keep what they have, because a lot of them can't afford to upgrade like you're wanting them to do.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. Anyone else on this issue?
James Hall, 1525 East North Street. Spent a considerable amount of time on this last week. I've had a lot of conversation with staff. I'll go back to my initial thing. We're getting to a point where we're coming up with definitions, and I think what Dean has presented here and the information where we're getting a definition of what we're really calling parking and what we're calling storage and outlying lots. If we could send it to the Planning Commission, let them get very good, precise definitions of what we're talking about, come back to you guys with a final draft, I think that'd be great. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Mr. Hall. Anyone else on this issue?
I'm Barbara Young, Tri Manufacturing, 1100 West Grand. I just had some questions of that list of businesses. I believe those are all businesses that own the property. I have industrial property that I'm a landlord, and I have triple net leases. This would impact me if the city says no exemptions on heavy industrial areas. And I have a tenant that has heavy equipment, has torn it up pretty good, and but I say, okay, you got to do it because you're not exempt anymore. They go, see ya. So there's some questions, I guess, for landlords. Also, I cannot raise rent. Maybe there's some that'd be torn up, but I cannot raise it because there's only so much I can do on that part. You just can't. Everyone's a cash cow. And so I think you need to look at that too for people that rent to commercial, not commercial, but industrial, heavy equipment type businesses, that there's going to be some special needs there. And I think we're not asking for tax abatements, but we're saying you need to consider the special needs that we have. Do you have any questions?
No.
Okay.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Anyone else from the public on this issue? Okay, if not, I'll go ahead and close the public section, and we'll bring it back to the commission for discussion and thoughts.
I have just a couple of things, and one I'll I think that I appreciate Mr. Hall, you contacting staff and working with that, and staff likewise working with it. I think that clear definitions are good. I think the problem last week wasn't definitions. It was that it was status quo or not. And so I think we're probably getting on the same page as far as it sounds like. We want to do an upgrade across the community, and I think that there might be just a small little breakdown in communication left, and that is that, and for you Barb, the heavy equipment on that, we're talking about the parking, employee parking and driveways. So the heavy equipment, I think they're realizing that tears up the lots, and that would be an allowable material for the parking of that type of equipment. And then just as far as issues with affordable housing, I think that's always something that gets brought up, and dilapidated housing and poorly kept housing and affordable housing are completely different things. As far as we need to increase the sewer plant operation, as far as I know, most of our stormwater runoff is not directed to and treated at the sewage treatment facility, so that's not too much of an issue. And then just to kind of clear up and kind of to put the comment was made that people won't buy properties and fix them up because they're afraid that they're going to trigger the 50% value increase or 30% footprint increase, and this is residential wise for a driveway and off-street parking. And I would make the argument that for the most part, if that's the main concern, that it's probably not going to be feasible to begin with to do any sort of remodeling. It's probably not in the plan. But I would argue more from the standpoint of saying if we want people to go in and buy distressed properties in areas that are run down, have a lot of overgrown gravel parking lots, I think that people going in there wanting to make an investment and have a substantial investment would want that investment protected so that their property values would stay at a level elevated commensurate with the investment that they've made. And so I disagree that you would lower property values. I think you not only increase property values, but you protect people's investments that are willing to go in and redevelop those properties. And once again, those are only triggered after 30% square footage increase or 50% value. So I think all the arguments made on that are might be a little bit over the top. And I think bottom line is that, you know, I like that the Planning Commission initially had looked at upgrading the standards community-wide, because I think that we could use it. I spent a lot of time. I went out, and meeting's gone much too long, but I actually went out and took photographs of some gravel parking lots that didn't look so good. And as I was doing that, noticed that there were an awful lot of gravel parking lots in both commercial and residential, particularly up and down Ohio and Broadway, which are two pretty major streets. And there's a lot more there than I kind of noticed before, until, you know, we started talking about this last week. And so I'm really glad that we're starting to try to take a bite out of this. So and having said that, I do appreciate all the work that's gone into it. I would support sending this back to the Planning Commission for some further clarification.
Yeah.
And I like the direction we're taking on the industrial side. I think that it's important and maybe just practical to have paving for customers and employees, especially when you have snow removal and ease of movement back and forth to vehicles. And on the residential side, I don't see that as being a difficult thing or a harsh requirement on local residents, because in many cases that particular part of the ordinance would not even be triggered. It may not be triggered in 100 years if you decide not to increase the value of the home more than 50%. And the other example that I could see where the paving would come into place is if a developer or someone else comes in and takes a distressed property and just completely raises the home and rebuilds. And in that particular case, I can imagine that paving would be a natural part of the consideration in the construction of a home. And so I don't think we're putting any undue hardship on residents or businesses by having this particular ordinance.
Dean, maybe just more of a question. I was kind of talking with somebody the other day. Maybe you could help me, and I'm sure the answer pretty much. But if somebody were to say, and we talk about the ecological aspects of it, which I can get into that. I can appreciate that. If we look at some of the older driveways, and even actually some, I've seen some people up in our higher end areas of town are taking and going back to the sort of two-lane. Some people are putting bricks and things like that in between them, but they're concreting basically the areas where the car would park with the wider pads. And then, you know, in the old days they would maybe have grass or something. People are tending to do a little more decorative with brickwork now. Is that an acceptable form of we're not saying that the entire driveway has to be concrete, we're simply saying the areas where the vehicles are parked.
That takes care of the actual driving areas, or the parts that support the vehicles. We found, I think, probably a handful of the 20 communities that we looked at that had provisions that specifically, I think they're sometimes referred to as ribbon driveways, or they have, which basically where the vehicle tracks are paved, and in between could be some other surface. The other thing I would point out that are as far back as 2006 and times when we were discussing discharge and erosion control and things of that nature, there is an option in our current and under this revision that alternatives to regular asphalt or concrete and pervious pavements of different kinds, grass pavers, all different types of alternative paving materials are available. They make a porous concrete product. Those are alternatives that have less runoff and are available, and they are alternatives to gravel or asphalt millings that also have less runoff, and those options are presently available if that's a concern. But certainly, as we laid out these options, those are the types of guidance things that we need is and part of the definitions and part of the explanatory material to make sure that question about having the dual ribbons or that approach, that it's clarified whether that's allowed or disallowed.
Great, thank you.
That can certainly be done and has in other communities.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I definitely would support that concept, but I want to be clear that it's the entire driving area, and I'm sure our definition says that, not 4 pads that somebody drives up on and parks 4 square concrete blocks, because if we don't define, somebody will be trying that. So, and I would agree with what Mr. Holmes said about we do have rules in place to go after the current gravel parking lot should someone decide not to remodel their house, or maybe their house is nice enough but they have a gravel area. I would, and I've suggested before, that we make sure we hire enough code enforcement officers to make sure that we are doing that. It's one of a long list of code violations we could probably bring up to date. So it's only tax dollars, but I agree we need to be going after those lots because they don't look good, and we need to bring them into accordance with our current code.
One other comment I forgot. This past week, I've been driving around looking at driveways, which I don't normally do, and what I saw was with gravel driveways, well-maintained gravel driveways were the exception and not the rule. And in terms of paved driveways, the paved driveways that were maintained were the rule, not the exception. So I think it's just more difficult to maintain gravel driveways, and people, through just, course of living, don't maintain them as well because they are more difficult to maintain.
Yeah, they're out there for sure. I mean, we've all seen the paved driveways that are in dire need of repair, and we know that it does go on. And again, that probably, there probably comes a point when those driveways are no longer even considered a hard surface. I've seen some of those, but I would agree with what Commissioner Hardy said, and that is, I think you tend to do exactly what you said. Your gravel parking lots that are nice are very much the exception, and your broken up pavement, sort of disrepaired, not just talking a little bit of grass, but I'm talking potholes and things, are probably a little bit more the exception to the rule when it comes to pavement as well. So I would agree with that.
I feel much more comfortable with the application from the Planning Commission this week than I did last week, and I'll support it going back to the Planning Commission to sort of spruce it up a little.
Sure. Any further discussion? If not, maybe we could move that to a motion. And
Commissioner,
sorry.
Just real quick, one thing I think it would be good to clarify is that there's a lot of talk last week, and there was Dennis is here, and he might need to clarify if you have questions. But there was talk about the impact of the bulk solids facility innovation center that they've started construction on, which was a partnership project. I think you know more about it than a lot of other people know about it. But anyway, there was a thought about the impact of the parking. I can't remember how many spaces. Most of the spaces there are actually paved, even though they wouldn't have to be today. There are a few spaces that were sort of alternate spaces that were considered that were gravel, with the thought, I think the thought being that if later enough people want them to be paved, they would pave those. In the Saturday's newspaper, and I don't know if this is accurate, but it does say that if the bulk solids renovation center or innovation center would was under this code, that it would not be located here. That's a pretty matter of fact statement, and it said what is 375, soon to be 400 jobs wouldn't be in this state. I don't know what that means, because I do know, based on the records that we have on the grant that we approved, the actual jobs in the facility are 30 to 31 jobs over 5 years. And the grant the City Commission approved for that, when you're looking at $1,600 a space for a handful of parking spaces, doesn't add up to very much compared to a grant of $233,000 that went to that facility. So I'm not quite sure I understand the context of the comment, and that's why it's up to you. It might be good to ask what that might
normally, since we close it off, but since maybe it was a specific question that you brought up, we could maybe bring Dennis up for this.
Thank you, your mayor. And thank you, Jason, for bringing that up. That was quite simply a typographical error by Mr. Haran at the Salina Journal. Because Jason's absolutely right. The numbers, the employment numbers aren't there, and that wasn't the context there. That was a typo by the author of the story in the paper.
So,
Dennis, was it
before you go,
accurate
I have a question.
I was going to say there were two pieces to that article. Was the portion that said that if the Bulk Solids Innovation Center would be constructed under the parking standards we're talking about today, that it would not have been located here? Is that accurate?
No.
So none of the article is
No,
accurate?
the comment I made was in the context of referencing the comment made on the October 1st meeting of the Planning Commission when Mr. Rogers pointed out and made the statement that had that regulation been in place, that El Dorado National would not be located in the state of Kansas. That was the comment I made.
Okay.
Very good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
That's very helpful.
Does that clarify for you, or? Okay. One thing I would encourage our, especially, I mean, let's face it, we're selling a business here. We're selling our city. That's what we're really trying to do. I would encourage any of our business owners, especially some of our bigger ones, and definitely our chamber, to be really careful when characterizing what would or wouldn't happen, because I'll tell you, from my first involvement in government, all I've heard is but for this, but for that, but for that, and I know a lot of that does take place. I just want us to be real, and again, I'm not saying, of course, that that's what would happen here, but it just brings to mind something that does bug me a lot, and I always hear, if we had to do this, we wouldn't be here. If we had to do this, we wouldn't be there. And, I can't help but think that Salina is the only community on the face of the earth that has requirements. It just surprises me how often I hear. In fact, when we find out that out of 18, in this particular issue, 18 what I would consider cities of similar abilities or populations or industry and retail are already doing this. If something like that were to be said, if we had to do this, it wouldn't be here. Now, I agree, if we had to do this holding area, which we estimate to be somewhere in the $2 to $3 million range, they might not be here. I could agree with that. But I hear that, I think, far too often. And I really hope that our business leaders and people who are involved in our future economic development will take a little more caution before throwing out we wouldn't be here but for, and really measure those words, because I think it doesn't, I think that it's hard to imagine that we're the only city that has any zoning or requirements. And in fact, I know many people who come to our town and talk about how easy it is to get things done in this community, contrary to what we hear about in editorialized, somebody heard somebody say this, that it was really hard to do this, but I have a real hard time ever finding somebody willing to come and speak directly and say, well, I was working with the city and here's exactly what happened and I had this problem. I think maybe I've heard one issue of that in the entire time, but I hear a lot about this. So again, just if that could get out to our economically enabled people in this community, just be a little cautious about what could be here and couldn't be here, because I think it doesn't do our community any good. So. Well, if there's no more thoughts, then I bring it back for possible action.
Let me ask one question of staff before we go into a motion. So, if we're gonna have staff put together the ordinance, how substantially different is it going to be from the one that is now? Are we just going to clarify that? Because there have been a couple of things put forward, and one of them that I wasn't quite sure I was completely comfortable was the idea that, well, if the parking area is behind the building, because then it just seems to me that it's like everybody's going to have a gravel parking lot behind the building and nothing in front of it. So
right. I think what you would find is you'd find definitions and/or narrative in the ordinance that makes it crystal clear that the parking area to be addressed is that for visitors, employees, and customers only. It, as Mr. Andrew mentioned, it would not include on-site storage of materials, a fleet of equipment, working areas, or anything of the sort. And so it would be whatever language it takes to make sure that the full intent is crystal clear for someone off the street so that they could implement it if they needed to.
So if I had a fleet of 20 service vehicles that went in and out of my business every day,
it's not intended to address where those would be. Or I shouldn't say where those would be, but underneath those would be paid parking. Those could be on gravel parking. Again, the thing to remember are the three keys: customers, visitors, and employee parking. The employee parking are obviously those that come to work, not necessarily the vehicles they may use from there and go deliver, but their vehicles when they come to work. Okay. And that's typically the parking out in front. Sometimes it'll wrap around a corner, but generally that's that front yard type parking you would see. It's not intended to require paved parking of any other areas on the site.
Okay. And then as far as any changes on the residential aspect on it that you would anticipate?
The only thing that we could do is if the city commission, as part of their motion, wanted to direct us to look at the aspect of the ribbon driveway as opposed to the fully paved driveway, we can certainly, with that direction, we can take that into account in what gets drafted.
Thank you. I mean, it's not a huge thing. It's just something I thought about that I think is at least kind of addresses a little of the ecological, and I think it's worth, and other communities are doing it, and I think it can be attractive when done right and properly maintained.
Can be a compromise there.
Yeah, yeah.
Mayor, may I ask
of course.
Staff a question?
You're legal counsel. You can always, you always get interrupt. I shouldn't say interrupt, interject. You always get interject, yeah. Especially when I'm talking. If it ever gets to that point like today, you just swing on in and keep us out of a lawsuit.
All right. I don't think there's a lawsuit involved here, but
yeah.
The question I had is directed to the other staff members to see if I can possibly add a little flesh to that what would be different question, and possibly direct it to Mr. Andrew. Is it fair to say that as this matter progressed, we were dealing with the pavement requirements as they related to required off-street parking, and that what we're finding is that simply the reference to required off-street parking, both in terms of the structure of the ordinance and maybe the development of the substance, is what we're learning that we could probably enhance and be more specific beyond just reference to the off-street parking requirements.
Yeah, and the point that planning staff was trying to make, that if we get to a point where there are certain definitional things, as what is an access aisle, when you define parking lot, define that, define what parking area means, what's parking area, what is a storage or staging area, that if you are going to further modify, those terms are not presently defined in the definitions section. So if you are going to amend the ordinance to add definitions, it needs to go back to the Planning Commission so that they can both initiate that and make recommendations as to adding, however, whether it's 3, 5, 7 additional definitions, whatever number is needed to best clarify all those terms. And we've identified 5 to 7 things that we think could be more clearly defined that would say this is what parking lot means, this is what it doesn't mean. But in order to do that, it does need to go back to the Planning Commission.
Okay, I just wanted to know if it was substantially different that we couldn't make those changes before a second reading.
I think speaking from the perspective of the intent has not changed. Obviously, the language would be pretty significantly different from what is in there today, or somewhat significantly different, but would provide that real detailed clarification that supports the intent. But I think I can look at Dean and say the intent's the same as it was.
Seems like
the
we save a lot of effort.
vagueness was in the language, not the intent.
Yeah. Seems we could save a lot of effort if we had the ability to make those minor changes before a second reading. So we could approve this on first reading today, and then with stipulated the number of changes with that.
If we can just think out loud here for a moment among all of us, the only thing that comes to my mind, and looking to Mr. Andrew as well, with the Planning Commission recommendation having included just the exception for the I-2 and I-3, if we're getting away from that exception, is it at least fair to say that proceeding at the city commission level, we would need to view as an overturning of the planning commission recommendation and
Yeah, that's
forcing the majority, the extraordinary majority?
You would have that aspect, but the thing that the point I was trying to make is that when we looked at the regulations that involved the vapor lounges and hookah lounges, there were two aspects of that. One was to have good definitions of what do you mean by a hookah lounge, what do you mean by a vapor lounge, what do you mean by electronic cigarette. And when that was initiated, it was two parts. It was enact definitions for these terms in the code and consider how those uses would be regulated. In this case, the public hearing that was held was simply on, and it is the Planning Commission that has to hold that hearing. The hearing was just on the regulatory aspects, and there has not been a hearing held on, or opportunity for public input on the definition of these terms. And if I was in a position like Mr. Hall with Great Plains, I would want to have a Planning Commission public hearing on what went into the definition of industrial storage area, and the place to do that, to have that input, is at the Planning Commission public hearing before it comes to you. So from our perspective, going in and adding sections to the zoning code that have definitions for all these terms, those changes have not been advertised. They have not had an opportunity for airing at a public hearing and get the type of input that we already got to get us here today. So I would agree with Mr. Bankston that if all we're talking about is whether I-2 is accepted or not accepted, then you are in a position to overrule the Planning Commission. But if we're talking about adopting a set of definitions, those, I think, need to be advertised. They need to be heard at a public hearing of the Planning Commission, an opportunity for input at that hearing, and then say, here are the definitions recommended by the Planning Commission with public input.
What kind of time frame and input? I mean, does this go back to the Planning Commission, then back to the paving committee, and then, I mean, or is this just going to be?
The paving committee is terminated, so it won't go to the paving committee, but it will.
So the turnaround's pretty quick.
The next meeting that the Planning Commission will take it up at will be the 2nd of September. Okay. And what we will do is report back the direction received from the City Commission and what steps they need to initiate to carry out that direction, and then we'll get it started. But that is what you see as option 1 in your blue sheet in terms of adopting definitions and things like that. The reason it's framed with going back to the Planning Commission is that we would have to identify the sections of the ordinance that we are amending to add and define and clarify those terms.
Okay. Thanks.
Commissioners, I would recommend when you're thinking about how to make a motion and you're pulling off of the probably the first option provided, if that's where you should go, that you may want to be clear that your intent, again, so it's in the minutes, is to address the customer, visitor, and employment parking areas. Just to be very clear.
Okay, great.
Along
Thank you.
with the rest of it.
Any other thoughts? If not, I'd entertain a motion. Or
Mr. Mayor, I move that we direct staff to prepare a revised ordinance for Planning Commission consideration that makes the necessary changes and provides the necessary definitions to eliminate all current exemptions that allow for construction of unpaid resident, customer, visitor, employee driveways and parking areas, addresses continuation as well as conversion of lawful nonconformities, and does not change the current standards related to work areas, storage areas, staging areas, etc.
Second.
motion is second to send this back to the Planning Commission with some, I guess, clarifications. That may be a good characterization of wording. Good enough? So be it. Any further discussion? Mayoral fiat. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? That motion carries 5-0. That moves us on to other business.
Mr. Mayor, can we have 5 minutes, please?
We can, indeed. How about we return here at 7:15?
The ever-elusive Dean Klenda back there.
There he is. So other business, I
Give
think.
Dean a shout out at City Commission.
Yeah. So we had a new introduction today. A new
Add him on Facebook.
new employee.
Follow him on Twitter.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh, that's for your fun.
Yes, Mayor and Commissioners, we do have a new employee we'd like to introduce to you today. Jim Brown came to us last Friday as our new building official. He comes from the Prairie Village area, and we're very pleased that the city manager has allowed us to replace that position, and Jim has been so gracious to stay here all evening to listen to the first City Commission meeting on his first full long day of meetings here with us city. So we're very pleased to have Jim Brown with us. Very excited about some of the things we'll be looking at in the future as far as some new codes, new code updates, and those type of things. He brings a wealth of knowledge from everything from planning and zoning to fire and rescue, as well as building services and building inspection to our community. And we think we're going to tap into a lot of areas of his intelligence, and it'll be a great fit for us as well as him. So
Great,
we're very
great.
pleased. And I'd like
Welcome.
to introduce Jim Brown.
Great. Glad to have you here.
Yeah.
Nice to be here.
Here you go. Yeah.
I've been in this industry since 1974-ish. Commercial construction mostly at that time. And served as a building official for the city of Prairie Village since 2001. Prior to that, I was in the building inspection services with Hamilton County, Cincinnati, Ohio. It's been basically a lifetime of construction or construction related between that and the military. So, and I am very pleased to be here.
Fantastic.
Look forward to it.
Any, I mean, other than a job, have some family ties here to Salina or any?
No.
No?
The job.
Just the job.
You don't dress up on Sundays, do you?
Occasionally.
Our former building official was the Bronconator.
I've heard the term, but
Yeah.
not yet Googled it.
Okay.
It's a lot to live up to.
Yeah. He was in, yeah, it was.
No, not to that extreme, no.
Not to that extreme, there you go.
Good to
It was
have
pre-
you
it was
here.
pretty awesome.
Just
Yeah,
one
yeah.
question for you. Are you fairly well versed in the international energy code then, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
All the
good.
international code.
Good. As you could tell today, we have a very green community. Everybody's ecologically
Ecologically conscious.
and, you know, with everything.
Quite green,
so.
yes.
Yeah,
Quite green, good.
we're counting on their support.
He actually does have a LEED certification.
I do have a
Oh,
lead
good,
credential
good.
as well.
Well, you're just the guy, because when we force it down their throats here in a couple of weeks and they go, why? They'll know why.
We're
Hey,
not
you
gonna
guys
do-
came to us saying you
we're
want to
not
be
gonna do that.
ecological. Come on, what's going on?
We're not going to do that, Mayor. We don't force down anybody's throat.
Oh, but we do. Well, should we move on here? We had something on our other business to discuss, a potential city commissioner appointment to replace Commissioner Shirley as she goes off.
Commissioners, yes, thank you for that. One item the city attorney and I had spoken about earlier is that last week we talked a little bit about the process and so forth, and Commissioner Shirley had offered up her resignation. We didn't actually have you officially accept that resignation.
Oh, okay.
And thought that probably that was a pretty good protocol to have happen to do that. So I'll turn over to Greg if he has any particulars he needs to have or address with that, but we felt that would probably be a good thing.
Okay.
Well, just a quick point. I think in that Commissioner Shirley had informed you of her thought on the matter. It would be best, I think, to formally recognize that in the form of an acceptance. That can be done anticipating, if it remains Commissioner Shirley's wish or willingness to remain in her role until a successor is identified and appointed. That can be done. You can accept the resignation without precluding her ability to remain in that role until a successor is identified and appointed. So if that's compatible with everyone's wish in terms of the progression of events, that would be one thing you might wish to consider.
Yeah, provided she wants to be subjected to more long meetings. I mean, it's up to her, really, if she wants to stay on. This guy's already thinking about asking for a raise. I'm just,
Or he might put in his resignation after
yeah, right,
this.
right. There might be, yeah. Yeah. So do we need to do this commission-wide, or is it something, is this another potential mayoral fiat, or is this something we need to do?
Well, I think this one takes the commission.
Darn it. I'm so limited in what I can do. But, so we probably should ask with the schedule, I mean, if it takes us another couple of weeks, is that still
No,
okay with you?
I had anticipated that when I did my resignation.
We also have a meeting next week, but not one the following week.
Right, because it's Labor Day.
There's a good,
Right.
so maybe one.
Right.
Okay, okay. So do we just need just some sort of motion to recognize and accept?
Yeah, I realize it's regrettable, but it would take the making of a motion and a vote on that motion.
Okay.
Do we need a date or anything, or?
Well, if there's a...
If we decide today on a new commissioner, that would maybe firm up a date more, but.
Well, I would think that if we should be able to agree upon somebody and have them in place by the September 8th meeting.
Right, we should.
I would think so. That seems
Okay,
very
so
reasonable.
would it be reasonable to say?
Next
effective
month.
At the end of, or
I guess
next
it'd be,
month,
yeah,
or
because I
at the
guess
end
it
of
would
the
be.
next meeting, or-
And how would that work? Would they swear in the new one at that meeting on the 8th as I exit, or?
Yeah, I would expect they would swear them in immediately
Okay,
to participate.
so we'll
in their
anticipate
first-
the
And
8th?
then their first meeting would be on the 8th.
Yes.
Okay,
Okay, if that works.
That works.
Okay.
so who makes that? Do I make that motion? I motion on my exit on
The mayor?
September the 8th,
I'm assuming
appointing a
extension
commissioner
would
to.
probably be in order there.
Yes, I
Is that
think,
correct?
yes,
Yeah,
I think you...
Probably be somebody
we may
else.
have to leave it to the others on this.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Oh, it's
I move we accept well, what do I call this?
Well, geez, Kay, throw me under the bus. I wasn't
Resignation.
expecting it from you.
Yeah,
I move we accept the resignation of
and she was quick.
Commissioner Barb Shirley.
Would that be effective August 25th?
Yeah, at the end of
Effective
the
August
meeting.
meeting?
25th.
Yeah.
So would that be my last meeting then?
Yes.
Okay, okay.
I'll second.
Motion is and a second to accept the resignation of Commissioner Shirley on August, 25th, is that correct?
Right.
Effective the end of the meeting, so she can sit through one more meeting. Does that sound fair to everyone? Right, okay. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That motion carries 5-0. Okay, so that'll take us on to discussing who her potential replacement may be. We have a few expressions of interest forms here. Is there a way that you wanted to go about this, Mr. Gage, or?
Well, I can tell you we have 5 interested parties, 3 of which are prior commissioners, 2 of which are not. Certainly, as I mentioned before, the practice that had been used just twice that I recall was to stay with that. You're not in any way limited to how you select. You could select by lottery if you wanted to, as long as they meet the qualifications. So you're not limited in any way. I guess the question is I know many of you have talked to people you know that might be interested that have served in that role. If you feel like the response that you received is sufficient and you want to work with this as a pool, you could look at addressing it today. If you feel like you need additional time, you could wait a week and see if there are any other names and then address it next week. Certainly you'd want to get it addressed by next week, so it's really your prerogative. If you do wish to address it today, we could just list names real quick and you can have your discussion and go from there.
Sure, I think we can discuss it today.
Mm-hmm.
And do you want to list the names, or do you want me just to read off who they are?
Yeah, I'd be happy to.
Okay.
We have Abner Perney, a very familiar name with you, a former 3-term commissioner. We have Alan Jilka, former commissioner and mayor. We have Kristen Gunn, was on the commission and also served as mayor and time on the planning commission. Both Abner and Kristen had served time on the planning commission as well. Those are the 3 prior commissioners that kind of fit that mold. We have expression of interest from Dr. Trent Davis, formerly on the Health Department board. And we have an email expressing interest from Joe Hay, who has not served on a city board that I'm aware of, but certainly has interest and sent an email out to everyone that was forwarded to everyone that an interest. He's, let's see,
It sounded like he wanted to run for commission next time, and I thought the protocol was on someone that's not planning to run for city commission next term.
Yeah, he expressed an interest in running, and again, you can dictate your protocol. That's been past practice, is to not use the position as a means to step into the next role. But again, it's truly up to you. You could consider him if you should wish to. It's really what your preference is. But so we have Joe. Those are the 5.
Sure. Just a quick question. I'm not sure where 1648 West Magnolia Road is. Is that still in town? Is that?
I'd have to look it up on a map. To be
Yeah, I
honest
don't
with you.
I don't know if that's I mean, I assume city commissioners need to live within the city limits. It's different than county. Yeah, so
Yeah, clearly.
I would guess he is with the intention, but it just might be something if maybe the assistant city manager's got time and he's got his electronic device, maybe he could punch it up.
Did you say 1648
West Magnolia Road?
That is Cameron Compression Systems, where Mr. Hay works.
Okay, where his job. Okay, so that may be.
So we're not sure where.
Okay, okay.
No, in this case, with the email, we don't have a residential address.
Okay, just a thought on there. Just wanted to make sure that we weren't kind of putting somebody in who couldn't even be in anyway. So just something to think about.
I think we're really fortunate to have as many people want to be up here to do this.
Well, don't forget, every time there's an election, about 17 people put their name in.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, yeah, there were about 17.
But they won't come to the meeting.
It's not like it's an honored group or anything. Yeah.
It's not like as if we make a fortune.
Yeah. Well, I mean, a lot of good names here, a lot of good experience for many reasons. I know Abner has been on the Planning Commission. I think he's been a city commissioner. I think it says 3 times. I hadn't realized that. I know Mr. Jelka has been probably, other than maybe one, our longest-serving mayor. I think he's been a mayor 3 times. And of course, Kristen Gunn was on. I think she was.
Kirsten was on for like 8 years.
Yeah, I was going to say
at least a couple different times.
At least a couple,
right?
yeah, a couple terms. So. And then first, of course, with Mr. Davis, who's well known in our community and been involved in a lot of boards, and it'd be a little different. I mean, I know in the past they've used previous city commissioners, but I know he was also the head of the health board and has been the head and kind of at least knows the process of the minutes. Mr. Hay, I see his groups here, but I don't think of them more as the civic-oriented. I mean, they're civic organizations, but not city-oriented. So, I mean, it's just a nice choice.
I talked with Kristen Gunn this past week, and she did mention that due to scheduling conflict, she would miss 4 consecutive meetings if she were the candidate between, I think, mid-February and mid-March. And she said at that point, I don't know if that's a deal breaker or not, but she wanted to let us know that.
Good to know. Good to know.
Commissioners, one other point that you might want to be aware of too is if for any of these folks, if they, and there are at least 2 of them that are serving on another board role for you, in order to avoid that whole duality question, if one of those persons is selected, they would have to resign from their current board in order to serve. That wouldn't keep them from wishing to be selected to be put on that board later in time, but they would have to step down from that role.
I mean, I go back a ways with city, but haven't we always traditionally replaced a commissioner with someone who has been on the commission so that they know the process and don't have that learning curve? I mean, I don't know if that was,
My recollection was the last 2 times we needed to do that. The last time was with when currently State Senator Tom Arpke was elected to the State House. We had to make that change, and we brought in someone who was a prior commissioner. And prior to that, my recollection was the person prior goes back a few more years to Commissioner Larry Matthews, who passed away.
That's right.
During the same time
I
he was in
remember that,
office.
yes.
And that was the process chosen at that point in time. I can't speak to prior to that, but those are the last 2 times I recall. That's exactly how we did that.
Well, and speaking to that, I mean, it was twice, and I feel like on this, if we're looking at someone to fill the position, I think it's at least my vision is that we pick somebody that would be really the best pick for the community, and so I don't necessarily feel like it's a requirement that they be a former city commissioner. of course, the 3 former city commissioners and mayors that are on this list are great. I mean, I don't think, one of the good things, I don't think we can go wrong here. But I just really feel like when I look at Dr. Davis's application and know what he's done in the community and just see all of the benefits that come along with a fresh set of eyes to look at things, and a professional. He's a physician. He is or an MD. He is a father, husband, former board director of the health department. I think he brings a fresh perspective. We often talk about diversity and having a diverse set of, having a diverse commission to really serve all of the community. And I think with Dr. Davis being an African American, I believe, helps us or gives us the opportunity, since one has arisen, to take that direction and really make something with it. So I think we could go. Any of these would be excellent choices. But anyway, that's kind of, I think it's obvious kind of where
I echo Commissioner Blanchard's on that particular name as well.
I'm not doing very well in that department tonight. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
My timing is. Quick point, if I may, since we are getting into the more substantive discussion of the comparative aspects. It is one point I should have made earlier. It is certainly your prerogative, but one point I should make, Commissioner Shirley, is that as far as the ultimate vote, one of the things that in identifying your successor, you would not participate in the vote.
Right. I have to recuse myself.
And
I was wondering
you may
that
have
earlier.
anticipated that, but I realized I hadn't articulated that. And before we got in,
she, however, did vote on her own resignation.
Yeah,
so, which I thought the letter did that, but I just.
I can do one, but not the other.
Was that 5-0?
Yeah, it was 5-0.
Obviously, it's the.
Sure,
those
the
commissioners
concept.
that do have to vote, their prerogative to
Because they
take
have
into
to work for that
consideration your
person.
thoughts.
Yeah,
but,
yeah, of course.
But it is up to the four to identify this.
And of course, happy to hear Commissioner Shirley's thoughts as well, recognizing that her vote obviously wouldn't count here. One thing I would say is obviously we want to retain the young population in town. We have a real interest in doing that, but we have an aging population, and the hospital is a very big part of our community, and I think that doesn't hurt the fact that Dr. Davis is a part of that large mechanism, and probably it would just be one more aspect that I think is helpful as we begin to grow our, it's a big employer in this community, and as we look at economic development and the future of how our city grows, I know medical has been one of the identified areas. Probably doesn't hurt to have somebody with that kind of background. Again, I know he's as I said earlier, very well respected person in the community. I've enjoyed the times when I was on the health board with him. I think he ran a good meeting, was very to the point, and which might make these meetings difficult for him. But he's. But again, I agree. I don't think you can go wrong with any of these. I asked Mr. Perney to put his expression of interest form in, and I know a lot of these people. I know for him it was a decision he had to sort of check with his wife. They're in more of a stage where they like to spend time in Colorado, and so to ask these people to come back, it's not just. I don't think for any of them it was probably just oh heck yeah, I think I'll just do that. I think any of the people realize these are all professional people who it'll be a burden on their time and probably a lifestyle they were used to. When we kind of plop it in their lap and say, hey, how would you like to come back on Mondays and be here till 10 o'clock and make no money and have people start hating you all over again? So, I mean, I appreciate that they've all put in, and like I said, I agree. I don't think we can do wrong, but the Dr. Davis, I think, is a good suggestion, and maybe a set of fresh eyes would be good.
I'd just like to propose, Kirsten, because we're losing the other female on the board, and we do look at things differently than you guys do. There's just no way around it. So, and I've known her for a long time. She's just excellent. Knows the job to start with. I mean, would be no learning curve there at all for her. As far as being gone, she did, when I talked to her, she did say that was a possibility, I think the end of February or first part of March. But then she said her husband said maybe he could work around that. So I think she's, I would really like to have the commission consider bringing back.
Commissioners, I'm sorry,
Sure.
go ahead. I'm sorry, I thought you were finished. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, it's okay.
One suggestion, if you should consider selecting someone other than a prior commissioner, I'd recommend that you give it one more week. And the only reason I say that is because the basic context of the conversation last week was primarily about a prior commissioner. So some of you may not have even thought about soliciting interest from a non-commissioner, and certainly those out in the public probably didn't think much about it, except a couple that showed initiative. So it kind of gives them a fair shot
I think
if
that's
you
fair.
wish to expand your thinking. And I say that with full agreement regarding the qualities of Dr. Davis, but just because of the
No,
context.
I think you're right. If not that we had necessarily a protocol, but the last two work commissions, and I think our discussion sort of indicated that was kind of the direction we generally went. So it may be unfair to other citizens who were interested in that. So I think you're right. That is fair. I definitely recognize Commissioner Crawford's. We are losing a woman. In fact, before this term, we had the first
we made
ever.
history.
We had three.
We had 3 women. That was first time.
And the meetings
ever.
actually got done faster. I'm not sure what that was all about, but
What does that tell you?
Yeah, right. But so it is worth considering. So if that sort of meshes with everybody, maybe given an extra week, does that seem?
Well, one other thing, I know that we are preferring a prior commissioner. I think that's sound reasoning. But one thing to say in Dr. Davis's favor is being chair or president of the Health Department board. Both Commissioner Crawford and I were on that board with him.
Right, he did an excellent job.
I mean, there were the 2 county commissioners, 2 city commissioners on that board, and he was not intimidated.
No,
I
not
mean,
at all.
He stood his ground.
He's out. He's out, Daddy. We need somebody who's easily intimidated.
But he could also
really
work and with and through and did a great job with people.
Did a good job.
And I consider that role by itself to almost be a kind of a almost commission role.
Right.
I don't know of very many other people that would be interested in that job that would have the same kind of relationship with commissioners that he did.
I might just add, too, that should the referendum item at the county level pass to increase from 3 commissioners to 5, that the governor will appoint 2 additional commissioners. I'm not sure that he's going to have a stipulation on there saying, well, they really ought to be former commissioners and have all the stipulations on there. I think that I think it's prudent. It's a good place to start. But I do think that when you do that, you eliminate a whole lot of other excellent choices. So I'm happy that we're able to consider go outside of that thing to consider others, and I think ultimately, as I said before, we've got a lot of really good choices. But
And I think the name of Aaron Peck was brought up.
Aaron's family
too busy.
Overruled.
Yeah, okay.
Aaron didn't check it as
Wish mine had.
Aaron
wish their Aaron's had. Yeah.
Aaron had thought it was going to be okay, and the job thought it'd be okay, but family overruled, which I totally understand.
Yeah.
Especially with 2 small ones
Well,
at
we
home.
appreciate that he was willing.
Yeah, we
He
do,
was
we do.
another really good.
Another one on
really
Highland
good-
Street, too.
Yeah. Keep the Highland contingency going
Exactly.
there. Well, a lot of good choice. I couldn't be happier with the people we've got here, and if we get more.
Logistically, if we how's that going to work then? Would we wait till the 8th to swear somebody in? Because we're not going to swear somebody in at the end of next week's meeting if we...
No, we can decide and probably
Doesn't
swear
take
them in.
long for Shane.
We could-
I presume
we
we
just
could
make
swear
a
them in at the
decision
beginning
about
of the
we
meeting.
could
They
do
can
it
take their
the
seat, and
beginning
then
of the
they can
meeting.
participate in the meeting.
I'm sorry, Mr. Gage.
Yeah, we could swear them in at the beginning of the meeting that they
On
would
the
expect
8th.
to
Okay.
participate, and then they
Yeah.
could participate.
Okay.
Yeah, and my suggestion on waiting is only if you're serious about expanding the pool, because if you're not, if you really think you'll go with the past commissioner and you think your pool there is pretty full, you really would necessarily need to wait a week. It's up to you. But if you do want to expand, it was just as a courtesy to the others.
Did we advertise this thing at all, or was it just word of mouth? And
we did not advertise at all because, again, the context of the conversation was prior commissioner, which, there really probably aren't that many that might be interested. So, no, there was no advertising.
Okay.
I suspect, though, if you should choose to open it up, we can lean on our article here, but that would be pretty good advertising.
Yeah.
And plus, you're still certainly able to individually, solicit interest if you want to.
Well, it's not like we need to go outside this group. I mean, there's definitely people in here who could do the job for sure. But I do kind of feel like, having stepped out of what we said we would traditionally do, we may do ourselves a favor by at least opening it up. There may be somebody out there who we all unanimously just say that's the person. And maybe there's somebody on this list too, but I don't think it's going to hurt us to.
I think that the theory of the past commissioner is that you do so many diverse activities. If someone's already done that in a short period of time, a few months, you can roll faster. I think that's probably it. So you can kind of weigh that however you wish. And again, it's whatever your preference is, but I think that probably weighed into that using that approach.
Thoughts, anyone?
A week's good. I'm ready to make a decision tonight, but we can wait a week.
Well, potential candidates know what the competition's like.
Well, I just don't know. By waiting a week, is it going to turn into a three-ring circus, or is it going to be?
That's up to you.
Yeah.
What
do you mean turn into?
It's very possible you have, no one else is interested. It's very possible you could have 20 different people that are interested. We really don't know. And the only point in that is that the context did not really take you there. So if a citizen on the street who might have been interested, walked in, they could say, well, thanks for even letting me know. Sarcastically, because they really wouldn't have gotten or understood that was even an option prior to maybe tonight. So it's just a courtesy thing as much as anything to open up. And that's if you want to expand your pool. You don't have to do that. It's totally up to you what you want to do. It's just a suggestion.
I could see opening the pool to 20 additional candidates would make this whole process long and hard and.
Us?
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. I guess it's a question of, I don't know if somebody wasn't paying attention and had an interest in serving and isn't even aware that it was happening. And I say that only because we did get a letter from
Mr. Hay, I was going to say.
One other person.
Well, yeah, you had one person. I think a lot of people probably understand it's happening. I just don't know if they understood that you would seriously consider them if they weren't a prior commissioner. But that's just a suggestion. It's truly up to you how you want to do that. You can look at it two ways. You can look at it and say, well, do we want to provide opportunity for those who might be interested that we may or may not know? Or you could look at it and say, it's kind of a recruitment deal from our perspective, which it can be. And commissioner or non-commissioner, we're kind of done recruiting. This is our pool. Let's take action on it. You could look at it that way. I mean, there's nothing wrong with either approach.
Yeah.
Have you known another time when someone came on to fill a position that had not been on the commission previously?
That was before me. I'll have to look over to a more senior member of the
I haven't.
team.
I mean, that's not to say they couldn't, but I mean, I just wouldn't even think of it because I thought selected.
I think the only two circumstances I recall at all were the two that we described
You
earlier.
mentioned, yeah, I remember Larry Matthews.
I think you bring up a good point, Mr. Gage, and that is, really, this wasn't a, hey, solicit interest. I mean, it is and it isn't. In a way, we were really kind of looking for somebody we kind of knew what to expect out of.
And that might be, I don't know about that. It's like, I mean, do you really want someone that you might know what to expect, or do you want someone that you feel would serve best the community?
I think that's probably more where I'm saying is we're looking for somebody who at least has that experience and knows how to be in a meeting. And I think in the case of Dr. Davis, we don't know how he would act as a commissioner. I think it's pretty wide open. We know how he's been on the health department, how easy he was to work with in those regards, how he ran his meetings. We don't know how he would be in a city commissioner role. But I think opening it up may be. I don't think we're looking for a Hail Mary pass here. We're looking for something we at least know is kind of reliable, and we at least know is we have some track record of how they perform. I think is really what we're looking for. Is that maybe make a little more sense than we're looking for a puppet? I don't think we're looking for that. But
yeah, I think, I mean, when you really think about it, there could be a lot of interest, much of which you wouldn't be, or many of which you would not be interested in the end, because you are looking for certain experience and there's certain qualifications. But that's really up for you to decide. And that's why I say if you feel like this is your group and there's really not anybody else out there, commissioner or non-commissioner, that you're looking to solicit or really seriously consider, you're probably ready to make a decision. The thought being on that is just if you did feel like you wanted to see what interest is out there, we haven't had a chance to do that. But that may not be a factor. It may be more of the solicit certain qualifications and you're ready to go. Like I said, you could do it either way. Either way is fine. There's not a right way or wrong way.
I have a feeling that whatever happens between now and next week, we might well end up with the same group of candidates as our top picks.
Probably.
And if what Commissioner Crawford mentioned about Kristen's schedule is not etched in stone necessarily, but maybe somewhat flexible, that would cast a whole different perspective on that one.
Well, I mean, certainly, I think we could visit with her more this week if we're going to have the week to, and to anybody else on the list. That, I mean, Abner Perney he was been around here for a long time, knows the community well, and so I mean, there's. Yeah. And he's gone a lot, I think, to Colorado, and that was a concern I heard somebody mention, too. So, I don't know.
Yeah, commissioners, without question, you have an excellent pool of qualified people. I mean, you really do. There's no question at all in my mind.
If we took an extra week, what I would do is talk to each of these candidates and ask questions, and instead of considering additional candidates. But I know the candidates sufficiently well, I could probably have a pretty good guess about their interest.
But the expression of interest may still come in, regardless.
Yeah, they could. One thing to think about too is some of the candidates may not mind you contacting them, but I mean they've been here and done that. This isn't new and great for them. I'm sure they could probably take it or leave it. They're just trying to do a public service for you.
Yeah, I know every single person that's filed in here, so I don't know Kristen as well as the rest, but I mean, I definitely appreciate her time as a commissioner. I did serve on the Housing Authority board with her, so.
She's
to the point.
She is to the point.
She's to the point. She also may struggle with some of our late meetings.
So we made full circle here?
Yeah, she may also reel us in. That's hard. Yeah.
She might add a little professionalism.
Yeah, that's true. We could use that.
Yeah. So should we go ahead and vote?
Looks like we're not.
Or do we want to wait until next week? Man,
I don't know that we're going to...
I think we should vote on adjourning.
I didn't know that we were going to go any farther with the list.
I wish we would have got pizza.
Yeah, it's almost 8. Maybe we should have
Our apologies.
No, we're good. No, we're good. I think we're fine. So is everybody okay with at least waiting a week's time? I mean, I think more than likely, you're right. I think our group is here, but I think it's probably at least fair from the standpoint of people may not have known, whether it makes any decision change on us. And who knows, there may be that one person out there that we go, yeah, we didn't think about that. That would be really great, and that, I suppose that could happen. But I mean,
Commissioner Shirley, you stirred up a
way to make our meeting longer. Yeah.
Let's go get pizza.
You guys have made, everyone here has made the meeting long, so it's my turn. My turn. Wait till next week. I'll make y'all stay till midnight next week.
Yeah, get that last paycheck.
Exactly.
Well, so if we're going to wait till next week, then does that seem to square with everybody, or? Okay.
Move we adjourn.
Second.
Motion.
Real quick.
Oh, sorry.
I just want to be clear. Wait till next week. Is it your intent to invite members of the public who might be interested to fill out an expression of interest form, or is it just to consider the pool you have?
Oh, good point.
I'm comfortable
We're
with
just going to do the pool we have, let's get
pool.
it done.
Yeah, I agree. If you're going to wait a week and consider the pool you have, just do it now. I think if somebody wanted it bad enough, they're in the know in the community, they would have, commissioner or not past commissioner, they would have said, hey, can I do this? That's my opinion.
Okay. So what do you?
I'm not voting either way. so.
Well, she can vote on this part of it. She can vote on
I'm
telling us
just-
to
no,
get this thing on
I'm
the
just
show on the
giving my
road.
opinion. Just giving my opinion.
Well, I mean, Mr. Blanchard, I mean, you, I mean,
I just made the point, I mean, if we're going to consider the pool that we have, then we need to stick around here and get this work done.
Okay.
Otherwise,
I might have to sit
if
back
you're
down,
gonna
Josh.
if you're going to ask for more, if we're going to use this to solicit more people to show interest, then I think you
I
have
think
to
the idea was
obviously give the
that,
time.
I think Commissioner Hardy suggested that we talk to some of these folks to see about their schedules, and I think that was the only thing that maybe.
That was
Well,
the
I think
only.
their schedules would be set, or otherwise they wouldn't.
That was my only question.
I mean, I don't know about my own schedule as far as that goes. I could be going 2 or 3, I mean, who knows?
Better not be.
yeah. Well, I mean, if we're only going to hold
This
it to
is
this,
very awkward.
yeah, if we're going to only hold it to this pool, then I agree. I say we just sit around and get it figured out and go on. If we're going to open it up to other people, then we can wait a week. But if it's the wish that we
I
just
would
stick
think,
with this pool,
let me just ask this question. What do we, you had mentioned maybe we're going to get some Hail Mary
I doubt it.
person sign up.
Yeah.
I mean, it's, I think, you know, it'd be one thing if we said, boy, we don't have any qualified
Right.
Mhm. It's a
choices
good-
here.
it's a good
So I
point.
think right now, I think with what Jason's comment was, is do you want to open up expression of interest to people that are not former commissioners? And if you do, then obviously we wait till next.
But at that point, to honor the process, you would probably have to go through some lengthy narrowing down process with the applications, which might hold up the process.
I agree. I would tell you, if you do that, I would go ahead and expect some interest that could cause a little more conversation.
Yeah.
I think that's probably very realistic.
I think we've got 9 months left. We've got, I mean,
Is there anything, there's nothing in our ordinance on city commission that says a replacement is, because
Seems
other
like there should
other
be.
communities do it all the time, and I remember when we were in Topeka and they were having the conversation about if the elections were moved to partisan versus nonpartisan, that the precinct captains or the party would make the,
Well,
would
that
make
was,
the-
that was a bill filed at the State House where they, at first, tried to bring politics into your elections in whole, and then they took it back, and then they said, well, we'll try to bring politics in only on an interim replacement, and that didn't make it. So none of the out of all those election bills that were filed and went through committee, none of that stuff made it. But that's what they were trying to do, is bring partisanship into your elections, one way or another.
Mayor, if I may, just for the record, we did have a motion and a second to adjourn. I don't know if the movement and the second
motion dies for lack of a
wishes
vote.
to-
Yeah.
wishes to
I'll
withdraw
withdraw my
that so you
second.
can.
Okay, withdraw the second. Does that work?
Yeah, it's a small
Motion
point. that-
dies.
Okay, motion dies then.
just to
Okay, that'll
make sure we're-
bring us back in so she's not over there fidgeting, wondering what the heck we're doing over here.
What if we throw out our 2 top choices and see what that sounds like?
Sounds
well,
fair.
if you're going to, have we determined that we're going to solicit more?
I think we've got a good group here.
I think so, too.
So do I recuse myself now?
Probably a good
Okay, sit
idea,
over-
unless you want to be
sit by-
associated with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
I'd like to recuse myself. Yeah, yeah, right. You don't get to leave yet.
No,
No,
I'll
you
go
don't get
sit over
to
there.
no.
I'm not going to leave.
Well-
I'm going to watch from the other side, right? So I have to recuse myself.
Yeah,
I'll do that.
that's
Our audience
I'm going to
is
take my
lonely.
water, though.
Good idea.
Maybe I'll go sit with Josh and the media over there.
Yeah, there you go.
This is making sausage, right? Is that what?
Yeah, yeah.
Making sausage.
Well,
Yeah.
sorry about that.
Yeah, making sausage pizza.
Well, I mean, Abner was my first choice. I went to him. I asked him. I thought he was, I liked a lot of what he thought about. But Dr. Davis seems like I said, I fall back. I like the way he was on the Planning Commission. In a way, I almost like the fact that he hasn't been a city commissioner in some ways, only because I've watched him in meetings, and I think he'll get up to speed in no time. And currently, Abner is on the Planning Commission. I hate to lose him on there. I think he's doing a good job where he's at. Oh, God, these are all good.
And I'll also say that, Alan has talked to me, and I've talked with him about this, and I think that he would also be.
Did he submit
a fantastic? Yeah, he's. Alan's.
Yes, I better look back. I didn't see his. Okay, it was
email
on it,
version.
wasn't it? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and likewise, he would be an excellent choice. Kristen Gunn, unquestionably great choice. I don't know Joe Hay, and don't know if he's on other committees or whatever, not according to the thing, so not recognize him. But, I had talked with Trent about, a willingness and a desire to fulfill and what is in essence a 9-month term. And, feeling that as a position, in his position as a doctor with the hospital, probably never have time to run a campaign and serve full time. Probably wouldn't have a desire to serve out a full 4-year commitment. So I think it's an opportunity, and why I support his application here is just that I think that it really does provide an opportunity for 9 months to have a really good, fresh voice. I think he's a clear thinker. I think he is able to share and get along with people and communicate his point of view effectively. And I just feel real strongly about the upside that he would have in serving. And I think it'd be a great benefit to the community as well.
Kristen Gunn still serves on the Housing Authority Board, and so she has never really lost touch with community service. And I participated on that board while she was chairing it, and she runs a professional meeting from beginning to end, and I think she would be a seamless fit on the commission. And also, I think Dr. Davis would perform very admirably on the board as well because of his prior experience, especially on the Health Department board.
He went through an awful lot when we were on the health board, and I in fact talked to him at one time about applying or going through a campaign for becoming a commissioner because he's very good and works well with people. So I mean, I think he's very good. The reason I'm fully in support of Kirsten is just because I've seen her in action and I know she's good, and it just gives another appeal from the female side.
You don't want to be alone up here is what you're saying.
Yeah. Darn you, Barb.
We've even had less representation from the black community on the board.
A good point too. I mean,
but there are a lot of them could have applied and could have,
right. Well, maybe this would be the catalyst.
Well, could be.
Well, I think overall, the one thing we can get out of this, I haven't said, what's the moment, the feel-good moment, the touchy-feely moment, is that we do need more of our female and minority populations to get on these boards. We always have a shortage on boards, and we need them. We need women and minorities to get on those boards, to get on the city commission, and
the only African American that I remember having served as a commissioner, as I looked at that board of mostly male commissioners, are Bob Caldwell. And
right.
Most of you probably don't remember him. Maybe you do, Commissioner Hardy.
Lived on Crawford.
But yes, we did.
Yeah, neat house.
And he made a very good commissioner, mayor, I believe. And he was mayor too. So
There's a plaza named after him.
Right, there is. So,
I can't even get a street. Well, I mean, thoughts on that? Sounds like, I mean, at least a couple of us really like it. I was thinking if you took Joe Hay, we'd all support Davis, and then we each had one of the others as our pet project. But if anyone wants to make a, I suppose it would just be done via motion then, or?
Yes, that would be the method.
Usually we only have bad choices. It's nice when we have good choices.
Well, I mean, I don't think any of us are going to vote against anyone
That's on here.
Whoever makes a motion. I mean, and Commissioner Blanchard, I know you're raring to go here. This is very awkward. I think this is very awkward, and I think we should change this process because it puts us all in a. We all have friends out there in the community.
Yeah.
I mean, Trent Davis is a husband or a doctor to my husband. I mean,
Yeah.
So this is just. I think this is just awkward.
It's very difficult to try to cull from a group, especially a quality group. It won't help you for this selection, but if you'd like staff to create a process that you could adopt by resolution, any commission could undo that, but we could try to give guidelines to that selection process if you think it'd be helpful if it ever happens again.
It's a little odd just because we're not used to it, but I mean, it's, like I said, at least we're not up here tossing out a bunch of names going, oh, not that great, you know what I mean? I think it's hard for us because there are so many good people, and they are all. And Commissioner Charlie is just that hard to replace.
You're just hard to replace.
Yeah, because she's so hard to replace.
The other difficulty is it takes a supermajority, and with 4, that's 3.
Right.
So it's really easy to stop, a nomination, so to speak, but it's a little more difficult to get one all the way through.
Yeah.
And I can appreciate Commissioner Crawford's point, but no matter what process you have, it will come down to this moment.
Yeah.
Exactly.
The
No matter
four of you it's a non-delegable role, and there are 4 of you that have to decide. And so I don't know that no matter how you get there, you end up where you are.
So the question
today.
is do we anticipate that we'd have any better than 5 choices, but what?
Don't start this
and
over.
that we've been discussing 4 extremely excellent choices that we.
I'm fine with the choices we have.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then I will make a motion that we select Dr. Trent Davis to fill the remaining term of Commissioner Barb Shirley.
I'll second the motion.
We have a motion and a second to appoint Dr. Davis, Trent Davis, to the position of Commissioner to replace the remaining term of Commissioner Shirley. Any further discussion on this? Okay, all in favor? Aye. All opposed? I don't know if I heard, did you aye as well?
Yeah.
4.
I said whoever
25
steps
years of
out
rock
there
and
and
roll,
makes,
I can't hear so well anymore. Okay, so
whoever
4-0.
steps out there and makes the first, I mean, who's
All
going
right.
to go against it?
Commissioner Shirley, you want to come back and move us to an adjournment, perhaps?
So, would we anticipate something at the end of next week's meeting then, or what's the next step?
Well, we could do that. Would be ideal, wouldn't it?
Well, we'll contact him. There's a lot of information we want to put in his hands so he can begin to be prepared. There's no possible way he will be fully prepared with all the issues by the time he sits in. But we'll do that. That's the only formal action that's necessary, isn't it, Greg? Or is there anything else?
Well, I think possibly the question went just to whether that meant that it could be accelerated to the close of the next meeting.
Right, but that his first meeting would be on the 8th.
Oh,
right.
Okay, on the 8th.
So there's still
We
3
can swear
weeks
him
left
in.
to-
But did I understand you were suggesting the possibility of swearing
Next week.
Would
the
you
end of next
swear
week.
in
Sure.
Might as
At the
well.
end of the
at the
meeting
end
after.
of the next week?
Yeah.
I assume that's fine.
That works,
Yeah.
I think is.
Okay.
Yeah,
Whatever
we
you-
can check and see. The schedule might dictate that, but
Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
we can check.
We should ask Shandy, I suppose. She's the one that will do that.
Yeah, she's the one that's in charge.
She's got more of a fiat than I got.
Yeah, that's the ultimate fiat.
Yeah. Okay, is that all you need? Does that work?
I move we adjourn
I second.
officially.
Yeah.
Second.
Motion is second to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
I was going to ask any further.